Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Beat Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, where today we are hanging out Bridgestone Arena Preds and the Vegas Golden Knights tonight, right here, 7 o'clock. Stillman and Company is presented by Southern Bank of Tennessee. Boy, do we have a lot to get into. Apparently, we were very popular yesterday, Ian, from what I've been told.
Oh, is that so?
We were popular apparently on Boston radio yesterday. We were popular on the other station in town this morning, so we will get to all of that. But the Titans GM search is continuing along its merry path of resolution. In fact, the Titans, we learned yesterday that they've got a list of 5 guys that are going to get second interviews, and they're all first-time GM candidates, whether it's Mike Borgonzi in Kansas City or whether it's Ed Dodds, who just got a second interview in Indianapolis, whether it's whomever. Terrence Gray is getting a second interview. Ian Cunningham is getting a second interview. A bunch of second interviews apparently are being planned, and the Titans are going to go from there. And I am just going to start off with what I don't like. And you can tell me up and down that it doesn't matter about who they bring in and how they got them and what they this and what they that. But again, I am just going to tell you from the jump what it is that the optics do not look very good for the Titans and John Eric Sullivan of the Green Bay Packers. I'm just going to tell you right now, I do not like this John Eric Sullivan thing. And I don't know anything about John Eric Sullivan as far as, is he good at drafting players? Is he good at what's he doing in Green Bay? Well, how involved is he in free agency? How much does LaFleur trust him? How much does Gutekunst? I don't know. And honestly, I'm not sure I even care. I just don't like the optics. I don't like the idea of Chad Brinker, who has not done anything in the NFL except for apparently convince the owner that he has all the answers with his cancer-curing AI model and his MBAbusiness.com degree and all of that. I mean, again, he hasn't done anything in the NFL. And yet he gets vaulted in this position of power and immediately turns around and hires his buddy. I don't like the optics of that. I don't like the way that smells. I don't like the way that sounds. I don't like any of that. And I'm sure if the Titans do hire John Eric Sullivan, their whole thing will be, no, Jared, he is the best guy for the job, and you will see. You know, kind of the same lecture I got about Ran Carthon last year. You will see. And maybe he is the best guy. And maybe we will end up seeing when it comes to John Eric Sullivan. But again, I am not a fan of what it looks like. Again, with these interviews, it doesn't seem like the Titans, if they end up hiring Brinker's buddy from the Packers, it doesn't seem like they're looking for the best person for the job. It would seem like they're looking for the best loyal to Chad Brinker soldier. I don't like it. Again, if they hire the guy from Indy, the guy from KC, the guy from Buffalo, then it's not as much of a, this is Brinker's buddy who he handpicked, who, again, I'm not saying he ran Carthon out in order to hire, but it would kind of feel that way. But here's the advice I'm going to give to Chad Brinker. Because I am honest and I am going to keep it. If John Eric Sullivan is the best guy for the job, then hire him. If you, Chad Brinker, are really convinced that this John Eric Sullivan is the greatest thing since sliced bread, which you know as well as I do, the second they hire anybody, they're going to tell us they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. They told us Brian Callahan was the greatest thing since sliced bread. They told us Ran Carthon was the greatest thing since sliced bread. They're not telling us now Chad Brinker is, but they've done enough of that over time. If you really think he's that good, hire him. Don't worry about what I think. Don't worry about what the optics are going to be. Don't worry about what the fans are going to think when you hire him. Just commit to your real belief. Again, I don't know John Eric Sullivan from a jar of Vicks. The only thing I don't like about John Eric Sullivan are the optics. But if he is the next Bill Polian, then go ahead and get the next Bill Polian. I remember years ago when we first started the Robbie and Rex Road program, and Ryan Porth was our program director. And Ryan Porth called me and he said, I just want to run something by you. I said, what was it? He said, do people think, he was asking about our building at 1025. He said, do people think that I'm hiring Robbie because we're friends? And Robbie and Porth go way back, and they are good buddies, and they were, I believe, in each other's weddings. But Porth said to me, he goes, do people in the building think that I'm hiring Robbie Stanley because we're friends? And I said, oh, I can't tell you what people in the building think. But I said to Porth, I go, my only advice would be this. If you think Robbie and Joe is the best show you can put together, then I wouldn't worry about what everybody thinks. And right now we have a morning show that I think everybody in our station's very proud of, and nobody is sitting there saying, well, Rob. But even if that was the case, Robbie Stanley has proven, hey, he's a good enough radio host. He's probably the best guy for the job. So don't worry about what it looks like. But at the same time, the Titans have to understand what this all does look like. And Chad Brinker has to be aware of it too. Just like he's got to be aware of how it looks now. Because it does look like he stabbed Ran Carthon in the back. It does look like he turned ownership against Ran Carthon. And it does look like he's denying responsibility for the horrible season the Titans just had, when leading up to this horrible season, all we heard was collaboration, this, we're all in it together, that. He and I are so aligned, we're like long-lost brothers, is what Brinker said on the Titans podcast. But the one thing Brinker hasn't done, and I think it is kind of insulting that he has not done this, is Brinker has not gotten up there in front of the fans and communicated any of that. He did not communicate, I didn't stab Ran Carthon in the back. He didn't communicate, I did not turn ownership against Ran. He did not communicate that he and Amy are in cahoots, or that he hasn't done any of that. And I don't think that has created a good space for where Brinker sits within this fan base right now. And then when you go and you interview two experienced general managers and they don't get to the second level, but it's all these guys on the come up who have no experience, that, Borgonzi, his buddy from Kansas City, Sullivan, his buddy from Green Bay. As we talk about the duck theory all the time, it kind of looks and it quacks like, hey, Chad Brinker's just hiring a loyal Chad Brinker soldier. So when it comes to this GM search, and I don't even know how much of a real GM search this is. You talk to the Titans, and oh no, this is a real GM search. This is a great job. So many candidates want this job. This is a great opportunity. This is And when it comes to everyone who reportedly has made it to round two, and I couldn't tell you about any of these guys because who knows what John Spytek does or does not do for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. None of these guys have been in charge of anything. So again, a lot of people are going to say that they don't know what to think, and they're either going to fill it with what they want to believe or what it looks like. And I can just tell you what it looks like. I do know what I fear. And I know what I don't like. And what I don't like is this idea that Chad Brinker is in charge and we're going to do things the Brinker way, because Brinker is going to just blindly hire his own guy who, no matter what, will pledge allegiance to the flag of Chad Brinker. Again, this is it feels like this is the United States of Chad Brinker. Chad Brinker is the emperor. He's the president. He's the king. And it looks like he's going to hire his buddy from Green Bay, John Eric Sullivan, and he's going to hire his buddy because me and my buddies, we can do it. Mike Vrabel's not even hiding that in New England. Yeah, I'm bringing Ryan Cowden with me. So again, what I fear is that Brinker, the smartest guy in the room with his MBA, is in charge and that everything's going to be done the Brinker way. And the people that are going to get hired are the people that are loyal to Brinker. And that it's all going to be about Brinker. And I fear that Brinker's incompetent. So when I know that they're interviewing a competent person like Thomas Dimitrov, I'm like, okay, maybe they hired this competent person at all. Nope, he doesn't make it to round 2. But Brinker's buddy did, John Eric Sullivan from the Packers. So with all of that said, reality is Chad Brinker is in charge right now. And with Amy, there is no telling how long the leash is. Brinker can beg the fans for patience and talk about draft, develop, retain, and how long that's going to take. But with Amy, you got until kickoff in September. So when it comes to his hand-picked general manager buddy, which again, it looks like is going to be the guy who gets hired, John Eric Sullivan, Kaharski had a story 2 hours after Rand Carthon was fired with John Eric Sullivan's picture on it saying, this is the top candidate for GM. If Brinker really thinks this guy is the best, if Brinker thinks this guy is the best scout, the best ball guy, the best Jared, trust me, then screw it, go hire him. Don't give a damn about what I think. Don't worry about what anybody else says. If this guy is the best, in the NFL, the cream always rises to the top. If he is the best, go hire him. And then let the wins and losses do the talking. That being said, I do not like the idea of Chad Brinker getting carte blanche and hiring his buddy to work for him. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Ed Dodds, again, got an interview today. He's in Indianapolis. He got the interview today from the Titans for the second interview for the general manager position. And we have a whole second round of interviews of people the Titans are talking to. And I'm going to tell you this right now. I hate it. I hate the semifinalists or finalists or whatever this is. I hate it with what they've done as far as the GM search is concerned. And it's almost like they haven't learned a single thing from last year. I'll explain. We'll get to it next. Stillman & Company live from Bridgestone Arena, 102.5 The Game.
I haven't heard anything, frankly, about how the interviews went. So I'm not going to sit here and say anything about that. But I do know going into it, I know that just in talking to Chad Brinker and talking to Berg Nihil on the call that they made, there's a huge emphasis on the Packers, right? And being able to bring that culture of drafting and developing. I would say the retain part is they want to be a little bit different because the Packers haven't quite retained a lot of their free agents. But nevertheless, they want to draft and develop and build from the draft and be kind of judicial free agent wise. So Chad Brinker is very much a follower and believer in that philosophy. So you're going to see that quote unquote lockstep there if he were to get the job. I personally believe that he is the favorite, and just from some things that I've gathered, he is the favorite. Um, but then you still have the opportunity to bring some other. There will be another hire or two in order to get that Packer situation in the.
The Packer way, TD says. That's what Chad Brinker wants. The Packer way, which is why, again, I was not surprised when I saw that John Eric Sullivan, again, the guy that PK, and I think PK talks to Brinker, the guy that PK immediately put out there after Rand Carthon got fired, John Eric Sullivan made it to the second round of general manager interviews. Now, again, when it comes to these guys, when it comes to Terrence Gray, Ian Cunningham, Ed Dodds, Mike Borgonzi, or John Eric Sullivan, I have no idea what any of these people are or are not responsible for, and neither do you. I saw a minor league radio host that is trying to make it in the major leagues, and I saw that they had this giant list out there where they took all these GM candidates and were, these are the good ones, and these are the bad ones, and these are the, you don't, what does Terrence Gray do in Buffalo? You don't know. I was listening to Boston radio on my way in here. They're trying to analyze what Ryan Cowden did for the Giants. You don't know. You don't know what Ryan Cowden did for the Titans. I mean, somebody told me that Ryan Cowden got so mad when they drafted Caleb Farley. Ryan Cowden thought he was going to get fired that night because he was so objective. So, but again, we don't know that. So with these guys, you don't know. And yet, let me just state for the record, this group, Terrence Gray, Ian Cunningham, Ed Dodds, Mike Borgonzi, John Eric Sullivan. Ian, did I leave anybody out that's getting a second interview that I forgot? Oh, John Spytek.
Yep.
John Spytek of the Six. I hate this list. Hate it. Hate the second round of interviews for the Titans GM job because it doesn't include anybody with GM experience. Somebody tweeted me today and said, Jared, Mike Borgonzi has all this experience in Kansas City. And that's true. But does he have any GM experience? The answer is no. So here's what the setup is going to look like. Chad Brinker at the very, very top. No experience. He's never done this job before. And the Titans will make sure that you know he didn't do this job last year. Chad was busy booking the flights. Chad was busy worried about the hotels. Chad was busy worried about the internet connection inside the building. Ran the team. So no experience for Brinker. Brian Callahan, no experience at head coach. The next general manager, if it's one of these six, no GM experience. I'm sorry, but these are jobs that you really can't prepare for. These are jobs where it's like being a parent, which I have learned. You think you know what you're going to do. When I become a parent, this is what it's going to be like. We spent all summer talking about, okay, when we have our son, here's XYZ. But anybody who's had a kid would agree, you don't really know until it's there. And so, again, I'm sorry, but these are jobs you learn on the go, and it's easier to learn on the go when you're working with people that do know what they're doing. And there's no way any of these six guys will know how to run the organization because they've never done it before. Every single person. Brian Callahan got up there at the end of the year, and he was talking about, man, being head coach is way different than what I thought it was going to be like when I was head coach. So when I think of the next Titans hierarchy, Brinker, no experience. Callahan, no experience. The next GM, no experience. Denard Wilson, if he stays, no experience. Colt Anderson, who, dear God, I don't think he's going to stay, but we'll get that. No experience. I don't like it. You try to be what you've seen without the confidence of knowing that you actually know how to be the general manager. I mean, again, Lindsay's mom, when we had our son, she was here for a month. And thank God, because if we had been sent home from the hospital and it was like, here you go, I'm sure there would have been a lot of failing at the very beginning. Luckily, Lindsay's mom was with us for the first month, so it was like, hey, what do we do? Okay, great. And I don't know if you've noticed this about the Titans, but failing around here is not treated with patience, regardless of what they ask for or what they say or whatever. So when it came to Jared, we promise this is a real GM position. Jared, we are going to find somebody to run this team with Chad Brinker, and we still believe in Brian Callahan, and you'll see, Jared. And I was cautiously optimistic that the Titans would understand the need in this instance for experience. Not every general manager has to have experience, but it's a lot easier for Eric DeCosta to learn when Ozzie Newsome and John Harbaugh are right there with him. It's easier for Brent Veach to learn how to be GM when he's working with Andy Reid. And I would argue it's probably easier for John Robinson to learn how to be GM when he's got Mike Mularkey, who's got experience. But here, nobody's got any experience. And yet the Titans they think they know what to do. Well, we will fix it, Jared. You will see. I said this last year. Where's the experience? When you don't have experience, you don't know what you don't know. And it's really hard to overcome that. And this is not a place where, again, they let you make mistakes on the job. They fire you very quickly. So when it came to this GM spot, I really wanted to see someone who's actually done before that can sit down and say, okay, here's where your issues are, and here's how we fix them. But again, it seems like the Titans are convinced that they don't need that. They are convinced that Chad Brinker knows, and they are convinced that somebody in this group of candidates, whether it's Terrence Gray, Ian Cunningham, Ed Dodds, Mike Borgonzi, John Spytek, or Brinker's buddy, the frontrunner, John Eric Sullivan, that they know how to put together a scouting staff. They know how to set the free agent board. They know how to get the right info on the draft. They know how to add the coaches to the scouting process. They know what kind of players Brian Callahan needs. They know, even though they've never done the job before. And that does not inspire confidence with me. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. We'll get your thoughts on this. 615-737-1025 on the GM search, which, again, the Titans are convinced and convincing when saying this is a real GM search. Is it? I don't know. So PK polled some NFL execs about who should run the Titans. And I was a little surprised by the results. We'll get to that in your phones next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
I had, in my situation, I had final football say, we call it, right? Final 53 with Mike Smith in my first 7 years as a GM. When we hired Dan Quinn, it was a recruiting ploy. Dan necessarily didn't want final say. Dan and I had a great relationship along with Mike Smith when I was there. Dan had final 53. There were complications in it only because you needed to make sure that there weren't mixed messages, right? And in the end, you could have a coaching department talking about who they wanted and a personnel department, and there's a lot of really good discussion there. Who is going to be the person that's going to step in and say, you're at loggerheads on that linebacker. You think this, you think that. Work it out, guys. Your owner is not going to sit in there and step in and say, I think you should take this linebacker or that. That's not her expertise.
Sure.
So who is she going to go to? This is something that no disrespect to how they're doing things there. If I could do it again, I'm a big believer in the general manager having final 53 early on.
That was Thomas Dimitroff, former Falcons general manager, on our show at the Super Bowl a couple years ago. And Ian actually brought up a real good question right there during the break that we were talking about. Ian, would you like to repeat the question you asked me as we were kind of talking about this, during the break?
Sure. I was just kind of going through the scenarios like, okay, so is this new GM going to have final say? And you said, no, you don't think so. And I said, well, what if this new GM, whoever they hire, and Callahan want player X, but Brinker kind of wants player Y? What are they going to do?
So I think that's a very good question. But here's the way I see it. Chad Brinker, even though he was part of the committee to hire Brian Callahan, and even though he took his pants off for Brian Callahan last year, Chad Brinker's not tied to Brian Callahan. And Chad Brinker, I mean, again, if you ask the people that cover this team that talked to Brinker and Berg Nihil last week, they will tell you that they think Brian Callahan is the first guy on the chopping block. So let me ask you a question. Brinker handpicks the GM. So let's say it's John Eric Sullivan.
Okay.
Brinker handpicks the GM. Brinker, as I said last week, Brinker did not want to bring Brian Callahan back. How many disagreements do you think there are going to be where the GM and Callahan are aligned and Brinker's not? And how often do you think Brinker and the new GM will be aligned, whereas Callahan may be on the outside of that looking in?
Well, I'm just confused as to why the NFL gave this go-ahead with the GM situation if that's going to be the case.
That Brinker's going to hire a handpicked buddy?
Yeah, and it's not going to matter.
Because the handpicked buddy will then just say, well, oh, no, that's what I wanted to do.
Well, no, I get what you're saying. Like, hey, they're going to be aligned. So it's not like they're going to have some type of situation where it's going to be split, right? Like they'll just say, oh, Callahan, tough luck.
Well, let's use the three in New England as the example here. Vrabel, Cowden, and Elliott Wolf. Do you foresee any instance where Cowden is not on Mike Vrabel's side?
No, not really.
See what I'm saying?
Right.
So the Chad Brinker guy is going to be on Chad Brinker's side.
Well, I'm just, I guess I'm just trying to get clarification here about how legitimate this GM spot's actually going to be and what the NFL talked about earlier this week and how it got cleared through that process.
I do wonder if the Titans had to cede a little bit of Brinker's power in order to convince the NFL that this was a real GM search. At the same time, again, the handpicked Brinker GM is going to ultimately do what Brinker wants him to do.
Feels that way, yeah.
Just like Ryan Cowden and Mike Vrabel. Again, I'm convinced that Vrabel's in charge of the Patriots, Cowden's his guy, Elliott Wolf's there, and eventually Vrabel will get rid of Elliott Wolf. And it will be Vrabel and Cowden running the Patriots. And then we will see. And I think here it is going to be Brinker and Brinker's guy, running the operation, and then Brian Callahan coaching the team. And if the team stinks, they'll blame Callahan. And if the team's good, then they'll pat Callahan on the tush. Or maybe they'll do what John Robinson did with Mike Mularkey, and they'll fire him anyways, even if he does do well. PK ran a poll at paulkaharski.com for NFL executives. And he asked, okay, of all the candidates, who would you vote for to be the Titans general manager? And there was a tie. Thomas Dimitroff got 6 points, 2 first-place votes. So of the 4 executives that voted, 2 voted for Dimitroff, and John Eric Sullivan got 6 points. one first place vote, which was worth 3, a second place vote, and a third place vote. So again, one exec with 3 votes, a first, second, third, only picked John Eric Sullivan. And I wonder if he only picked John Eric Sullivan because, hey, John Eric Sullivan is the man, and we will see. You will see, Jared, John Eric Sullivan. He is the man. Or I almost wonder if that guy did it to kind of cook the books a little bit. Because if the guy's got a second and third place vote and he uses that second or third place vote on Dimitrov, then Dimitrov goes to number 1. But again, 4 executives that Paul talked to, 2 first place votes out of 4 for Dimitrov. And I think they're probably saying, that guy we know can do the job. Period. 615-737-1025 and our phone line is driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. One texter says they are looking for the one with the biggest lips to kiss Chad and Amy Adams-Strunk's rear end. That is what it sounds like. Again, that's why I think it's going to be John Eric Sullivan, the Brinker buddy out of Green Bay. And if they hire him because he is the smartest football guy you have ever met in your entire life, okay. But if they hire him because he's Brinker's buddy, well, I got a problem with that. One texter says, no one with experience was invited for a second interview. Brinker is a moron. Well, unless Brinker, here's the thing about all these guys in football, and it's the same in radio too. There are so many people out there that do not have the experience to be good on the radio, that do not have the talent to be good enough to be on the radio, do not have the personality to be on the radio, do not have the knowledge base to be on the radio. And yet everybody thinks, if you give me that show, I'll do so much better than Jared Stillman. And that's what happens with jobs that people want, is it's like, I can do it. And so Chad Brinker's the latest guy to stick his hand in the air and say, I can do it. It's no different than Vrabel. When Vrabel went to Amy and said, I think I've earned the right to be GM, that was probably an honest, from the heart ask by Mike Vrabel. That he thought he could do it. The distinguished gentleman on the YouTube chat, the guy that we thought for the longest time might have been Rand Carthon's burner, says, give it up. Thomas Dimitrov did not make the cut, move on. I'm sorry, Mr. Distinguished Gentleman, but I'm not like you. I don't just move on once my guy gets fired. You were all in Rand Carthon every single day, and here we are a week later, and you're like, move on. No. You got to stand up for what's right, Mr. Distinguished Gentleman. Do not flip on Rand Carthon. You should be in these YouTube comments talking about how the Titans should burn it down because they fired Rand because you thought Rand was so good. I don't want to hear it there. One texter says, we have gone from the Patriot way to now the Packer way. My question is, the texter says, when do we actually start doing things the Titan way? Well, here's what I believe. Until you get it right in anything, until you get it right, you're going to always try to emulate somebody else who's successful. And that's, again, in anything, any kind of business. If you open up a fast food restaurant, Jared's Fast Food, come on into Jared's. We're going to sit there and talk about, you know what McDonald's and Wendy's did, and they had a lot of success. Do you want to follow the Wendy's model? Do you want to follow the Dunkin' Donuts model? Do you want to follow they're opening a Tim Hortons out in Lebanon, and you bet your sweet fanny that I will be at Tim Hortons in Lebanon when that opens. Which, by the way, if Tim Hortons wants to become a official sponsor of the Stillman and Company show, we are not against it, Tim Hortons. But do we want the Tim Hortons model or do we want the Taco Bell model? But then once you become something, like I don't think Taco Bell is trying to be like Wendy's, if that makes any sense. So it's always going to be this is the model we want to emulate, and then you become it, and then all of a sudden you forget about all those things. So when will they actually start doing things the Titan way? They'll start doing things the Titan way when they're good. That's when they'll start doing it the Titan way. Mike from PA says, people in these spots always pick people they know. J-Rob got the job because Floyd knew him and how he worked. The worst case are more years of sucking. You wanted Thomas Dimitrov because he talked to you and you know him, and that is no different. So that's not actually the case. Thomas Dimitrov is not the general manager that I talk to the most, the former GM that I respect the most, or that I talk to the most, and I almost never talk to Rick Spielman. And Rick Spielman is the guy that if I had a choice, again, it seems like the Titans probably knew, if we're operating, Ian, by the duck theory. Ian, if we're operating by the duck theory, is it fair to say they're going to hire John Eric Sullivan because he's Brinker's buddy?
I mean, I don't know. Not necessarily. I don't think so.
That's what I think. I think it
I
looks
don't know
like
if
a duck.
it's quite like that. I don't know if it's quite the duck theory yet, but
we're going to be the Packers. So we're going to interview the guy from the Bills.
Did they say the Packers specifically?
They told TD that.
Yeah.
We just ran the cut of TD talking to Brinker and Burke Nihill. They're going to want to do things the Packer way.
Like the Packers. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe
so to
not.
me, it looks like, again, it looks and it quacks like they're going to hire Brinker's buddy and that this is all about Brinker. That's what it looks like. That's what it seems like. Again, if I own the team, there's a good chance that Rick Spielman would be the general manager of the Titans. He would have started off as the leader in the clubhouse. I don't know Rick Spielman that well. Again, we've crossed paths a couple of times. It's serious, whatever. But I don't really know Rick Spielman that well. I know Thomas better than I know Rick. I know Mark Dominic better than I know both of them. I know other general managers. But again, to me, the comfort for me is knowing that Dimitrov knows how to do the job. Like, he knows how to do the job. All these other guys might know how to do the job. They might not because they've never done it. Thomas has done the job before. I wanted Thomas because Thomas was interviewing. Spielman wasn't interviewing. Dominic wasn't interviewing. Thomas was interviewing. So again, it wasn't for me about just, oh my God, yeah, this is why you want Thomas and this is no different, and John Eric Sullivan. And again, I want somebody that I know can do the job that's already done the job before. And right now you got none of those things. Nobody, once they hire one of these 6 guys, nobody is going to be doing the job. None of these guys are going to have any experience of having done it. They're all going to be learning on the fly. Callahan, Brinker, and the next guy. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. We're back to your phones. Again, we are live from Bridgestone Arena at Stillman & Company, 1025 The Game.
That's crazy to me because I was going to ask, I didn't know his name, Chad Brinker. So they already, in fact, have a GM who's going to handle GM duties, yet they're going to hire an actual general manager that's not going to have any say in the roster. How does that work with like Rooney Rule, with executive, like all that stuff within the NFL? Because that was weird to me.
So I think what happened in Tennessee was they hired Rand Carthon. I think they realized that they wanted to give him a little bit more support. And so they allowed Chad Brinker to be that person. Rand Carthon and Chad Brinker came in together. They have the same agent. They're good. They were good friends. I don't know if they already were.
Same agent?
Mm-hmm. And together they came in. And when the Tennessee Titans have had conversations with other teams in regards to players and trades, and obviously everyone around the league is talking, everyone always said to me, they do business with Chad. And I used to always say, well, what about Rand? What about Rand? He's the general manager. And I do think Rand had a strong presence there, and I think he had a say, but it sounds like Chad Brinker was really the one doing the GMing.
Ooh! How about that from Diana, Ian?
Yeah.
That is some tea. So, again, this is that Diana Rossini Scoop City podcast. Her and the old quarterback Chase Daniel do the podcast. Chase Daniel's like, okay, so hold on, wait a minute. They got a guy in there that runs the team. Yeah. And he was like, but they're searching for a GM who's not the GM. And it's like, yeah. And then they say, so what's the deal here? Well, everybody I've talked to said that Chad Brinker was running the Titans last year anyways. Again, that's not the sentiment that the Titans are pushing. The sentiment the Titans are pushing is the idea that Rand Carthon ran the Titans in 2024, and Chad Brinker's job was to make sure that the ashtrays were cleaned out and that people got to the airport on time. Again, don't ask me if I believe that, because I don't, but add that to the list. Also, how about that? They share the same agent. That's freaking cold. Like, if you're Chad Brinker, do you call your agent? You say, yeah, I just met with the owner. And the owner says that she's going to put me in charge. And the agent's sitting there thinking, way to go, Chad. Way to go, baby. And then he gets on the phone with Rand and says, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, Rand. I mean, it's just crazy. Unbelievable. Dylan in Antioch says, what the hell is the Titans way? Losing, no stability, trading your best players? Tell me more about the Titan way. The Titan way seems to be treating your fans like idiots. That comes from Dylan in Antioch. Again, you don't have a way until you're good. And then when you're good, people want to be like you. When you were good in the 2000s, you got your defensive coordinator, Greg Williams, hired by somebody else. When you were good in 2008, Jim Schwartz got hired to be head coach by somebody else. When you were good on offense, Arthur Smith got hired. So again, at that point, people do want to be like Tennessee. That's how the league works. Thomas says, no reason to keep playing clips from Diana Rossini. Anyone who pronounces the name Titans the way Diana Rossini doesn't know anything about them, and she's still getting fed info from Vrabel, who has no interest in this team. Again, I don't think Diana is as hooked into the Titans as she was when Vrabel was the coach, for obvious reasons. Again, Vrabel's not the coach. But Diana, I mean, she does talk to people around the league when it comes to dealing with the Titans. I just love this whole thing. Again, about like, oh no, Jared, I mean, Rand Carthon ran the Titans. Here's Diana saying, yeah, that's not true. Again, I didn't hear this. I went back and I listened, and I didn't necessarily. Somebody told me Buck said on his podcast that they were thinking about firing Rand in training camp. I mean, just give me a break. Wes and Hermitage says the Titans found a kicker from FedEx at one point. Just hold an open house and hire a guy to be the GM from Amazon. Nobody has a damn clue how to run a business, much less a football team. I believe that was the punter that the Titans found, Trevor Daniel, who had punted at UT. They found him. He was during COVID delivering for FedEx. and they put him out there in a Thursday night game against the Colts, and I believe he got 2 punts blocked. So a couple people have texted about Mike McCarthy. So here's the thing. If you want to be the Green Bay Packers, would you not hire Mike McCarthy to be the coach? And it's one thing to say, well, last week we committed to Callahan. That's one thing. You didn't know Mike McCarthy was going to be out on the market. Now, I'm not a huge Mike McCarthy fan, so I don't see the benefit in this, and I don't want to be like the Packers, and I don't want to be like Brinker. But again, Jared Stillman is not running the Titans. Chad Brinker is running the Titans, and it would not surprise me if Brinker hires his Packer buddy. They let Callahan flail out there for a year, fire him, and then go get Big Mike. Because that would be the Packer way to go get Big Mike. Craig says, if you don't like the list, who would you choose that isn't already on a team? Well, number one, I should be allowed to choose people that are already with other teams because, again, that's, part of the fishbowl here. But I've said, for me, it would be Rick Spielman. And I want somebody with serious administrative experience that the way the Titans are promoting this situation is Amy owns the team, but Burke makes the business decisions and Chad makes the football decisions as if they were the owner. That's what the Titans want everybody to believe. Whether or not that's true, who knows? But that's what they want everybody to believe. In that case, I'm okay with Spielman being the owner's voice, being the one that reports to the owner and runs the football team. Because he's done it before, and he did it well in Minnesota. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Sports Talk Radio gets a bad rap, and there are a lot of different reasons for this, but one of the reasons is people in sports, owners, coaches, general managers, athletic directors, they seem to always think that all people in sports radio do is second guess. They don't ever give them credit for first guessing, but second guessing, and they resent that, and they hate it. Well, there is a second guess of the Titans that we're going to get to see play out with somebody else. And in hindsight, I'm wondering if this is the route the Titans should have gone. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 615-737-1025, live again from Bridgestone Arena and presented by Southern Bank of Tennessee. Predators fans, do not miss Smashville Live tomorrow night at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs at 6 o'clock. See your Predators star players up close and personal and get autographs and pictures. Preds player guests will be Jeremy Lazan and Cole Smith. That's tomorrow night at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3. The game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios, Bridgestone Arena, Predators, and Vegas tonight, 7 o'clock, right here, 102.5 The Game. And we are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. So let me say this. Hindsight is always 2020. And one of the biggest criticisms of sports radio by people that play the games and coach the games and own the teams, and it's always, well, it's easy to second guess. It's easy to be an armchair quarterback. Head coach does something stupid on Sunday. People in the media say, why'd you do it? And it says, well, it's easy right now to say that was the bad decision. And sometimes it's, no, that was stupid. But I've always said the backbone of sports talk radio is first and second guessing the coach and the general manager. That's just what sports radio is. Here's what I think they should do. Here's who I think they should draft. Here's who. And one thing I take very seriously is I like to first guess. I don't like to necessarily second guess, though sometimes it is inevitable. You know, when Brian Callahan's coaching against the Green Bay Packers and it's 4th and 1 and he sends out the punt team and the fans boo and Callahan calls timeout and sends them out there and they run some stupid draw play with Will Levis. Like, I didn't know they were going to do that. So I have to say in that moment, that was stupid in that second guessing. But there's one thing that I didn't feel this strongly about at the time, but I do now. And that was the decision that Amy Adams Strunk made to not give Mike Vrabel what he wanted. So go back to the beginning of 2023. John Robinson gets fired in December of 22. Vrabel finishes out the year. Ryan Cowden is the interim general manager. And it is now well documented and well reported that Mike Vrabel wanted Ryan Cowden to be the general manager. By the way, we told you that last year, that Vrabel wanted Ryan Cowden to be the general manager. In fact, I believe that Ryan Cowden thought he was getting the job. And Mike Vrabel, after talking with ownership, thought Ryan Cowden was getting the job. But according to the reports, Amy Adams Strunk had heard Ran Carthon at the Accelerator program, wanted to hire him, and she was going to hire him. Vrabel tried to convince her not to, and that just pissed her off. And I've said to TD, I said, at that point in time, when Vrabel is begging Amy for total control, when Vrabel is begging Amy for Ryan Cowden, at that point in time, I think she had to make a decision. Instead of expecting Vrabel to play nice, she should have made the decision right then and there. I either give Vrabel what he wanted, or I have to get rid of Vrabel. Instead, she tried 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I think I look back at it right now and I see what the New England Patriots are doing. Mike Vrabel's the head coach. Elliott Wolf is the director of player personnel, something. He's not technically GM, but he is essentially the GM. And Ryan Cowden is going there to be the number 2 in the personnel department and to be the vice president of player personnel or whatever. It's Vrabel and Cowden to work with Elliott Wolf. The Patriots are ultimately going to give Mike Vrabel final say. Again, when John Robinson got fired, Vrabel went to Amy, and I knew Vrabel was going to do this. In fact, I asked Vrabel after Robinson got fired before the Jacksonville game, I asked Vrabel, do you think you're qualified to run a personnel department? Because even though he was not qualified and had no personnel experience, I knew Vrabel. And I knew Vrabel was going to be like, I can do it. And of course, after he gets fired, it comes out that Vrabel did go to Amy and he did want to go and run the entire operation. Vrabel thought he was Pete Carroll, thought he was Belichick, thought he was Sean Payton, thought he was, the guys that have won Super Bowls. He thought he was like them. Give me the responsibility. So when you think back to what Amy did with what she wanted, what Vrabel wanted from her and what she wanted to do, she tried to marry those two things together. You were never going to be able to do that. The shotgun wedding between Vrabel and Rand was never going to work, especially when Vrabel made it clear from the jump that he had zero respect for Rand Carthon. And again, in hindsight, it's pretty easy to understand why. if she was committed to Vrabel after 22, and the way she talked, it sounded like she really was, then she should have put Vrabel and Cowden in charge. She should have given Vrabel the handpicked general manager he wanted. She should have let Vrabel make the draft choices. She should have, and guess what? We're going to get to see who was right and who was wrong. Because I have to say, I am excited to see what Vrabel can do running the Patriots. Where, again, technically they won't say whether or not he has final say, but he definitely has final say. Vrabel was asked yesterday in his press conference if he had final say. He said that we're going to share a vision. Yeah, they're going to share his vision. Vrabel was the big fish. Elliott Wolf isn't even technically the general manager. They are going to do things the Mike Vrabel way. Even if technically they don't say they're doing it that way, they're doing it that way. And within a year, Elliott Wolf will be selling groceries, and Vrabel and Ryan Cowden will be running the Patriots. And I'm excited to see if he can actually do it or not. Again, my vote in January of 2023 was that Mike Vrabel could not run a personnel department. That Mike Vrabel could not be the final decision maker on the roster. Could not draft players. I think I'm going to be proven right about this with Vrabel's tenure in New England. But at least we get to see. Because Vrabel thought he was good enough to do that here, and I didn't. So now we'll get to see Vrabel call the shots, and we'll see who's right. Him or me. Him or Amy. And I do think Vrabel's a good coach, and I've always said this. But again, I go back to where Amy was when she had Vrabel and Robinson together. And do I think there was probably some friction there at the end? Yeah, probably so. But there was but there was no question in the hierarchy. And Vrabel wasn't going to try to challenge control away from Robinson. But once she made that move, she had the choice. I can either go forward with Mike Vrabel, but we got to do things the Vrabel way, or I got to start over. And she chose neither. Just like last week. It's either do we stick with the status quo and give Rand more time and give Chad more time and give Callahan more time, or do we rip the Band-Aid off, hit the nuclear option, and start over? We're doing neither. We're firing Rand, but we're putting Chad in charge. So now we'll get to see. Because, again, he has made the situation in New England his situation. They have the 4th pick in the draft. You really think after Robert Kraft fired his coach to woo in Mike Vrabel, after Mike Vrabel was a great player for us, and now all of a sudden it's, Vrabel, yes, you think that if Elliott Wolf wants to pick the tackle out of LSU and Vrabel wants to take the wide receiver out of Arizona, that they're going to pick Elliott Wolf over Vrabel? Of course not. So now we get to see things done the Vrabel way. And I'm kind of excited. I'm kind of excited to see if Vrabel can actually do it. And if Vrabel can do it, I will say I was wrong. And if Vrabel can do it, I think she'll be absolutely barbecued by these fans. But again, I don't think Vrabel can do it. 615-737-1025 here on the program. If you want to weigh in, that's 615-737-1025. And by the way, Boston's a very tough place. And I can't wait to see Vrabel deal with the media there. And I know he dealt with it as a player, but it's not the same. But they got a little taste of Jared Stillman in Boston and the real truth about what went down with Vrabel. And here's how they took it. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 1025 The Game.
You guys are going to ask me questions about culture, which I'll be happy to talk about and discuss. One thing I've realized about culture is that you can find out what your culture looks like when your family, your business, or your team is at its low point. It's not when you're winning Super Bowls, or it's not when you're 7-1 or 10-1, because then everybody's waving towels and everybody's happy and they're excited to come to work. But when you get hit in the mouth, or you're down, or the chips are against you, then you can take a snapshot of what your company or your team looks like, and then you'll find out what kind of culture you have. But that culture is going to be built on winning, a competitive spirit throughout our roster, throughout our players, and throughout our coaches and our staff, and the ability to put the team first and care about somebody other than yourself. And I'm excited to do that. I'm excited to get to work.
Michael Richard Vrabel. And Ian, did I not tell you that his press conference yesterday was a lot like his press conference when he took the job here?
Yeah. Playing all the hits, huh?
I mean, have you heard that one about culture before?
Oh, yeah.
You know what's funny about Vrabel is there are two things Vrabel said over the years that have really stuck with me. That I like, again, I had my issues with Vrabel and Vrabel had his issues with me. But that, again, when it comes to Mike Vrabel and it comes to just some of the, like, he is a coach and he is a leader. And there are two things. The first thing that he said that I've always thought about is if you worry about the job that you don't have, you don't do the job that you do have. And they've always thought about that. Like I see people that come to Nashville and they're on channel 2. And it's like all they have are aspirations to go somewhere bigger and better. And they never do the actual work they're supposed to be doing because they're all worried about their next job. That's like in this job. Somebody called me about a year ago wanting me for an opportunity. And they said something like, do you have a tape? I'm like, I don't have a tape. Just listen to the show. Just hear me do the job. That's always stuck with me with Vrabel. The other thing was culture. Culture is not defined by what it's like when you win. It's defined by what it is when you lose, when you're at your worst. And so the people of Boston hear Vrabel say that, and they think the same things the people in Nashville thought. Yeah, this coach gets it, Mike Vrabel. He's a man's man. He's a football guy. He's our coach. He's a leader. He's a great coach. And I have to say, Vrabel's a good coach. But that doesn't mean there wasn't another side to the Mike Vrabel era in Nashville. And when people need help filling in the blanks, Ian, you know who's a great person to call?
Who's that?
Me. Which is what they did on 98.5, the Sports Hub in Boston. Vrabel got hired, and on Sunday I did a hit with Matt McCarthy. He's a good man. I did a hit with him on the weekend. And apparently the people in Boston are now opening their eyes perhaps to A, the real Mike Vrabel, and B, me. Here's what they said.
That's how it ended with Vrabel in Tennessee. Again, that's Jared Stillman on with McCarthy and Leroy yesterday afternoon here on 98.5 The Sports Up. A tremendous spot. Jared Stillman's a talk radio guy in Tennessee. He's the us of Tennessee.
Everybody put their head up their ass, huh?
Like I said, he's the us of Tennessee.
Like, was that done in unison?
Vrabel carries a lot of Belichick's bad habits with him, is according to Stillman. Again, I'll let him say it himself. Just play the beginning of number 2 again, Jimmy, real quick.
Patriot fans know Mike Vrabel as a player, but if you could, give us some of the pros and cons of Mike Vrabel, the head coach.
Okay, you want the pro and the cons?
Yes.
Here are the pros and the cons. Pro, he's a lot like Bill. Con,
he's a lot like
Bill.
Okay, so that's pretty much it in a nutshell, that he's insular, thinks his bleep doesn't stink, thinks it's all about him when things are going well, wants to surround himself with his guys, his coaches, his loyal people, to a fault of other guys. He, well, I'd say those are the big ones.
He hated Matt LaFleur.
Okay, Vrabel's been given credit for having good offensive coaches, but it turns out he hated Matt LaFleur. And then when Matt LaFleur went to Green Bay, he promoted Arthur Smith only because he didn't want to give him to Matt LaFleur to take to Green Bay. So he did it out of spite and ended up with another good offensive coordinator. Then Arthur Smith left, and he had Tom, Dick, and Harry for his final 3 years in Tennessee, and it all sort of fell apart because he tried to surround himself with his guy and his people, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's an interesting perspective.
Ian, any lies detected in any of that?
Not really.
I mean, again, it was hilarious because I went on in Boston and they were like, well, we actually are excited that he might be able to hire a good offensive coach because Vrabel had Matt LaFleur and Arthur Smith in Tennessee. I'm like, he hated Matt LaFleur and Matt LaFleur hated him. That's why when they play each other, it was Sunday Night Football in Green Bay and LaFleur tried to run up the score in the end. And then Thursday Night Football in Green Bay, Vrabel tried to run up the score. They hate each other. And then the reason that they made Arthur Smith the offensive coordinator was because LaFleur was trying to take him to Green Bay. That's the real Mike Vrabel, not this. Mike Vrabel's such a good finder of coaching talent. He found Arthur Smith. And because of Downing and because of Kelly, because of those guys, you know that that's exactly how it really went down. And then the more they played the cuts of me, the more I filled in the blanks, the more these guys started to realize, man, I'll tell you what, this Jared Stillman, he tells the truth.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. What a takedown.
This guy's a hoot.
Yeah, seriously.
No.
Should get him on our show. Did he go to the Super Bowl?
Well, I thought
He
we'd get
will
him.
be at the Super Bowl.
Yeah, we'll get him on eventually, but it's like, this is the perfect thing. He can't dish it any better than this.
No.
We'll just play the cuts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but we might be able to get a little more out of
Okay,
him.
yeah. Well, yeah.
We can squeeze him a little.
Is he going to New Orleans, Murray?
I'll check it.
Jimmy says yes.
I've heard yes.
Okay.
My sources tell me yes.
Either way, the other side of Vrabel. Don't you want to hear it?
I completely disagree.
Thank you.
I mean, he hated Matt LaFleur.
I think we put a couple of drinks in him after the show. We get some really good
Doesn't
stuff.
feel like he needs it.
I don't think so. But again, there's the other side to Vrabel. And I have the Vrabel potential coaching staff in front of me. Here's what I think it's going to be. By the way, Ian, did you see the story? Tommy Rees, who was the tight ends coach in Cleveland with Vrabel. He was Saban's OC at Alabama, and he was the tight ends coach this past year in Cleveland. He was the guy that apparently Vrabel was floating out there that Vrabel wanted to hire to be OC, and the Browns made him OC today. So, he's out. So here's what I think it's going to be. Head coach, Mike Vrabel. Top executive, Ryan Cowden. Offensive coordinator, Tim Kelly. Quarterbacks coach, Todd Downing. Wide receivers coach, Rob Moore. Running backs coach, Tony Dews. Tight ends coach, Luke Stocker. Remember when Luke Stocker was on the Titans? He handed the ball to Luke Stocker on 4th and 1 at Houston? That's his tight ends coach. Offensive line coach, Keith Carter. Ian, am I missing anybody?
I don't think so.
What do we do with Pat O'Hara?
I don't know.
He's got to be on the coaching staff too, right?
Probably.
Okay. Here's what I don't know. The defensive coaching staff. Dean's out. He won't be DC. Bowen's out. He's not leaving the Giants. Who is going to be Vrabel's DC if Bowen and Pease are out? We said yesterday, we brought up Terrell Williams.
I think that's a good choice. Yeah.
But is he ready to make Terrell Williams the DC?
Probably. If Shane Bowen can be DC, so could Terrell Williams.
Terrell Williams will definitely be on the staff. Terrell Williams will be on the staff. Ryan Kroll will be on the staff. I'm trying to think, is there any other Vrabel, guy he just loves?
Does it have to be a previous coach on his staff?
No, but it has to be somebody that he's crossed paths with. Houston, Tennessee. I don't know, who's on Jim Schwartz's staff in Cleveland that he could, be drinking buddies with now. Or Ohio State. I mean, that's where Vrabel hires from. And by the way, before we're kind of fixated on the defense right now, special teams coach, Craig Aukerman, you know it. You know there's no way it's not Craig Aukerman as the special teams coach.
Who was Chris Harris, defensive back coach?
Yeah, but I don't think that was – see, the two guys
DC.
that stayed, Chris Harris and Justin Alton, that stayed from Vrabel's last staff to this staff, I think those might have been more like organizational hires than Vrabel hires. Then again, maybe
fair.
they were just trying to keep their jobs. Maybe Chris Harris does go as DC. I don't know. But, and yes, Aukerman will be the special teams coach. But that will be the Vrabel buddy crew. And then we're going to see. This is what I'm excited about. We're going to see who's right. Is everybody here that thinks, Vrabel's a good coach, but Are we right? Or is everybody in the national media that drops their drawers at the mention of Mike Vrabel, are they right? And this is what I'm excited about. We're going to see. Let's go to Tracy and Dixon, who's up next here on Vrabel. Tracy, thank you for calling and thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
All right. Hey, Jared, I appreciate you taking me call. Hey, real quick, I'm from Concord, New Hampshire. Went to Concord High School and graduated in '88. You were in the area, I guess, for a few years.
I was.
So it's just mind-boggling that you're not from New England. And when I've been listening to you last year and a half, 2 years, never really dissected where you're from. But how you're just a big Brady fan out of just the blue. And a question, and you nailing it perfect with the coaching staff for Vrabel right now. Everybody that comes out of the Belichick era players, they have that demeanor of they've got to have everything around them the right way. He did not have it here in Tennessee. He did not have everybody he wanted, every way to make it possible to make it work. That's how Belichick works. And that's all their mindset, win, win, win. They stay up all night, hours of the night. They win the Super Bowl. The next night, he's learning what he did wrong the next that game. So I don't know how you got the Belichick and Brady era. What made you go that route for Brady since you're from Tennessee?
Well, okay, so I appreciate your call. When I used to hate the Patriots like everybody else, and then when I was up there in New Hampshire, like I just was in awe. I was just in awe of how they operated. And I thought it was a lot of everybody around the country hated the Patriots because they, were jealous. They hate us because they ain't us. And I had just this immense amount of respect for Tom Brady. And the more I got to learn about Tom Brady, the more I liked Tom Brady. And then I worked with a guy who was part of that Patriot Brotherhood. And at that point, there was no keeping the horse in the barn at that point. He had left. What about Kerry Coombs on Vrabel's staff? Do we think that
as DC? I don't know about DC.
So he was the DC at Ohio State. Like, would he have stayed as the DC? Would he become DC when Dean Pease left? Probably not.
No.
It was probably always. See, here's what I think is crazy is the Bowen thing.
I mean, what is there a reason Bowen can't do it?
Well, so apparently it came out Sunday night when Vrabel got hired that Bowen was not interested in leaving the Giants. Now, I don't know if that was that the Giants weren't interested in letting Bowen go. They let Cowden go out of his contract, but, maybe DC's a kind of a different thing. Or maybe it's that Shane Bowen didn't want to work with Mike Vrabel because Mike Vrabel can be a Michael Richard Vrabel.
Doubtful.
Here's the defensive coaching staff under Bowen in New York. One guy that came from the Titans, that's defensive assistant Zach Kerr. He's the only guy.
I mean, I'm trying to see, there's plenty of Patriot sites who are trying to, predict the assistants who could follow Vrabel to the Patriots. Bowen is mentioned. Terrell Williams is mentioned. Chris Harris is mentioned. There's some Ohio State connections, but nothing really that stands out.
I mean, none of those guys sound like I would not say, oh, God, that's a great coach with any of those guys I just mentioned.
The dude that got fired from the Bengals.
Lou Anarumo?
Yeah.
I think it's more likely Lou Anarumo ends up here than it would there.
But he's speculated on some of these lists. So
the Giants have a woman named Laura Young, who is the director of coaching operations. What is that? The director of coaching operations.
I don't know.
Okay, 615-737-1025, which is the phone number, 615-737-1025. So Ramon Foster got up on his high horse today and had to respond to the criticism that he's gotten about his terrible interview. And they went after one person in particular. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 1025 The Game.
I understand that there are situations when you are interviewing a subject and that subject is not able to answer questions about specific topics. But you still have to ask the questions, even if the response is no comment. I appreciate the question. However, I am not allowed to answer this question, so on and so forth. From what I heard of this interview across the street, there were few attempts to ask such questions. Now, I don't know if there was an agreement beforehand with Rand Carthon, who said, I will come on your station, but you will not ask me about X, Y, and Z. If it were me, if those were the conditions, I would not have done the interview. There were questions about what he was listening to right now. I say this as respectfully as I can. We don't care. We don't care what what's on Rand Carthon's playlist. We don't. So,
and I think that would have been something that would have been, for example, a great thing to have in a weekly visit that could have been part of how you get to know somebody, how you connect with the audience. But your point is well taken. For this particular interview, that probably wasn't a pertinent thing that the listeners wanted to hear.
That was yesterday to the horrendous interview that was conducted by Ramon Foster yesterday of Rand Carthon. They hyped it up and they said, we've got Rand Carthon in studio at 9 o'clock. And I'm like, wow. Okay, we're going to have to talk about it. Congratulations to the other station on getting this great interview. Let's see what he says. Let's react to it. And then they did not ask him a single meaningful question. Kayla tried. I'm going to give Kayla a little credit. I've known Kayla for a long time. I like Kayla, but they blew the interview. So this morning, Ramon Foster got on his high horse and responded to my criticism yesterday, which also echoed everybody else's criticisms. And let me just state for the record, that criticism is not changing. The interview they did with Rand Carthon yesterday was a disgrace to journalism. It was insulting to your listeners and a bad look for all of us in this profession who know what we're doing. Because it gives fans the idea that all of a sudden that is what our job is and not, again, what us real media people do. And so this morning, somebody called me and texted me and said, did you hear what Ramon Foster said? And I said, no, what'd he say? And so somebody called me and played it for me, and I listened to it, and it wasn't really like a going after him kind of thing. It was kind of like that. But his response was basically, you can't get Rand Carthon on your show. We can get Rand Carthon on our show. Wow. What a great diss. And guess what? You're probably right. I probably can't get Rand Carthon on this show. But the reason why is because Rand Carthon knows if he comes on this program, he's going to get asked real questions about Chad Brinker. He's going to be hounded about saying last year the ball didn't bounce our way. He's going to be asked about Amy Adams Strunk and what he saw and what he thought. And did he feel like he got stabbed in the back? And did he feel like he got lied to? He's going to get asked about, hey, what about the people out there that thought the Titans hired you as a minority hire? He would get asked that. Because those are the questions that people want answers to. And I can't tell you what Rand is going to say or isn't going to say. That's the point of the interview, is for people to hear. Rand, how did you feel when the Titans said Chad Brinker's now in charge? I don't know how Rand felt. You ask, he tells you. And I can promise you, if I learned anything about Rand when he was the GM, he's not interested in going anywhere that isn't a safe space. So he went on your show because he knows your show is a safe space. Because he knows every time he goes on your show, he can tell you, oh yeah, this controversial draft choice, I had some fake GM reach out to me and say, that was a great pick. And you guys will sit there and say, wow, did you hear that? Rand said that another GM texted him and said it was a great pick. I hear that, and I'm like, you said the same thing for Skoronski and the same thing for Colton Dowell. And I just want you to know, it is insulting as a talk show host, as somebody who's actually good at this, as somebody whose career this is. It is insulting for Ramon Foster to pretend like he knows what the job entails after that performance yesterday. Because he made a fool out of all of us yesterday. You have that kind of performance, and it gives people the impression that these jobs exist to cater to the team and their wishes and their narratives and their feelings. That's what people start to think. People start to think, oh, it's the job of the talk show host. It's the job of the journalist. It's the job of Oprah Winfrey to have somebody on her couch and to patronize them. Not to get to the bottom of what people want to know. Not to hold them accountable and be the bridge from the fans to, in this case, the fired general manager. The bridge from the fans to the coaches, to the owners, to the executives. That is the real job. Again, I'll use Oprah as the example. Do you think Oprah Winfrey became Oprah Winfrey and that her couch became the go-to spot for celebrities, especially those dealing with controversy? Because when they got on Oprah's show, she didn't ask them about why they were in the news? Or do you think it's because Oprah was the bridge to the public for the things that they wanted to know? That's the job. And I understand. He played in the NFL for a long time. And when he played in the NFL, he wasn't worried about being the next Oprah Winfrey. And he made a lot of money. And that's great. But that job is not this job. And when you do that interview you did yesterday, when you promote that interview that we've got Ran Carthon, and you have Ran Carthon there, and you play movie clips, and you talk about music and things nobody cares about, you insult all of us in this profession. You insult people that actually now, and I think it's crazy that people go to school for this, go to school and have the dream of being in sports media. Because again, Ramon Foster hasn't really done anything to earn his position other than be good at football. And that's fine. But stop acting and lecturing like you know how to do this job. You don't know how to do this job. You weren't trained how to do this job. So stop pretending like you know. And I'll give you some advice. Tune in at 5 o'clock today to this program when we have Barry Trotz, the Predators general manager, on the show. And you can see how a real interview is done. The Predators right now have a 2.2% chance of making the playoffs. Ryan O'Reilly is now mentioned in trade rumors. And guess what? We're going to ask about it. Because that's what real broadcasters do. So if you're going to tell everybody, hey, at least our show got Ran Carthon on, we didn't ask him anything interesting, but we got him on our show, well, congratulations. But if you want to brag about doing your job as a journalist or a talk show host then do it right. And I'll give you another advice. We all have bad days. We all have bad interviews. We all have this happens. You blew the biggest interview. Take the L and move on. But don't be acting like all of a sudden you know how to do this, Joe, and you make us look bad when you do an interview like that. 615-737-1025 here on the program. Stillman and Company. We'll get to your phones next. Stillman and Company, 1025 again.
Mike, you made a comment during all that that's kind of getting parsed here, talking about
Who's parsing it, Gentry? Well, then ask the question, Jared.
What question? When you said that other organizations don't do things as well as the Patriots, and that because you've been there, were you referring to this organization?
They've won 6 Super Bowls. They won 6 Super Bowls in 20 years. That's what I was alluding to. You know what I mean? I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's just extremely, a lot of success. And, and I guess just probably having talked to, Bill and, Mr. Kraft and the coaches I know they're on staff. I guess that was just my way of, bringing them good luck on Sunday. No, I mean, just the amount of success that they had there, that was the whole message was just for myself and the former players and everything, just to not take things for granted. Just the because I got traded myself and then went to a team that went 6-10, and it was like, where you're just trying to find ways to win other than knowing that you're going to win when you show up. It was my whole intent of saying that they've had it pretty good there for 20 years, 6 Super Bowls and however many else they went to. That was it, Jared. So appreciate you. You'll never think like me, Jared. We're nothing alike. So I'm not. I'm the dumbest person in here. I promise you. I guarantee you I'm the dumbest person in here. But we will never think alike in anything that we do. So if you ever want to think how I'm thinking, just think the opposite. think like a dude, think like an athlete, think like a grown man, and then you'll think how I'm thinking.
A lighter note.
That wasn't light enough for you?
Man, the good old days. Vrabel and his New England comments. And Joe Rexrode. I mean, I cannot wait for tomorrow. Jared versus Joe. Joe Rexrode tomorrow. I mean, now that Vrabel's a Patriot, I feel like I should automatically get the Jared versus Joe win. But yesterday, Joe doubled down on his Rex rant saying that, no. When I said that was a nothing burger about those New England comments, I was right. Meanwhile, here's what they said about Boston, about who was right, who was wrong. 98.5 The Sports Hub. This is Felger and Maz.
When Mike Vrabel came up here for that Hall of Fame thing and said, be appreciative of what you have here. It isn't like this everywhere else. Don't take it for granted. Stillman went on the air in Tennessee and said he's clearly calling out the Titans and calling out Amy Strunk and the Titans ownership, and he's taking a shot at us, and he's on his way out. And Stillman got all sorts of blowback from Titans fans at the time, and he was a bad guy for saying that stuff, and he was obviously exonerated at the end of the day, proven right on that. So I guess he's still got a hair across his ass for that, or just his interactions with Vrabel, or I don't know.
No hair across my ass. I am excited about Vrabel coaching the Patriots. I'm excited about figuring out who's right, who's wrong. Was Amy right? Was Vrabel right? I don't know. We'll see. I actually think Amy was right. That Vrabel did not need to be the king of the organization. But we will see. We shall see. But again, as far as the New England comments, clearly they mattered in hindsight. And remember that. Apparently, I can't listen to other radio stations and shows while I'm on the air, but apparently I'm being called a liar. I was right about that one. I was right about that one. One texter into the text line, Will and Music Rose, says, is the general letdown of most situations in our city sports teams a cultural thing? Are we a bad sports city? I feel like we get let down, nothing happens, and then we march to our next letdown. Well, number one, I used to talk to Floyd about this, and I used to say, why does it feel like everything here in Nashville, just, again, as a Titans fan, a Preds fan, it just always feels like at the most important times, the worst thing always happens. And he told me that's how everybody feels. He said that's how every team feels if you're not the Patriots when they're winning the Super Bowls with Brady. And I think there's some truth to that. Again, I think sports is inherently negative because one team wins the championship every year. However that may be. Like and so every year it's like, oh, we had all these great wins. Think about if you're a Vikings fan. You had all these great wins this year. You had a great season. You won 14 games. And you're sitting there thinking, oh, God, when the going got tough, we couldn't come through. Packer fan, same way. Cedric is up next here on the program. Cedric, thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Jared, a long time ago, man, I called you and we talked about my perspective is this city, the fan base, and now I'm going to say certain people in the media, we're still in the infancy of being an NFL city. And when you have an interview like Rand Carthon and you get somebody like me that works in the corporate world who's sneaking to listen to that interview, and I don't hear the question, what did Amy say to you that day when you were in the office? When did you know, or when did you get an inkling that this was coming? Do you feel Chad Brinker had something to do with it? Like, I got none of that, man. And I listened to those guys in the morning, but I was thoroughly disappointed, man. And again, man, I think this speaks to this city still being in its infancy with being an NFL city, man. Like, we got to have more questions. Like a couple of you guys, TD does a great job, I think, at asking questions. I love what you bring to the table, but we don't have a lot of guys, man, asking a lot of hard questions. And in a day like that, when we want to hear from the GM, dude, we got to have it, man. We got to have it. So I think you're spot on, man. Enjoy the show, bro. Appreciate it.
Yeah, look, like I thought that was pretty minor league yesterday. Like, I'm just going to call it how I see it. I think that, and instead of pushing back and saying things like, yeah, we asked a lot of hard questions, you should just say, yeah, we should have done better. Look, I've had my moments that I'm not proud of. It happens. One texter says, Vrabel hated you. He really hates you. He always will. I wonder who the Jared of New England is that he will continue to hate. Ian, I have a pretty good idea who Vrabel's going to really hate in New England.
Who?
Mike Felker.
Okay.
I mean, that show is, you think I'm bad? That show, they are relentless. Here's the thing about Vrabel, to the point of the last caller. There was a certain element with Vrabel of people that covered this team that treated him like King Vrabel, that just carried his water and just Mike Vrabel because he's a dude, and that is cool, and you want to be liked by the cool guy, and I was obviously not one of those guys. I'm the one that discovered the language Vrabelese. But they're not going to do that in Boston. Like, if Todd Downing ends up being the offensive coordinator there, and Todd Downing performs the way that Todd Downing performed here, they're not going to accept Vrabel's bullcrap when it comes to that. And that, I can't wait to see. I mean, when I lived up there in New Hampshire, I remember the first time I got hooked on sports radio in Boston was because their fans wanted to get rid of Belichick and Brady in 2012. And I said, man, my team has Mike Munchak and Jake Locker, and these guys hate Belichick and Brady. So I cannot wait. Vrabel's going to try to develop a quarterback. I cannot wait to see how that goes down. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Let me tell you what I was unprepared for yesterday. I was unprepared for this speculation that Dion Sanders is going to be a Dallas Cowboy and that the Titans may be trading for Dak Prescott. What? We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, Bridgestone Arena, Predators, and Vegas tonight, right here at 7 o'clock on 102.5 The Game. We are presented by Southern Bank of Tennessee. So last night, I was watching Ian, my guy, Sam Darnold, the Sam Chise.
Looking good.
Oh, my God, he looked like crap. I mean, you know I love Sammy D, and I don't think that Tua could have done better. But, boy, that was tough to be the president of the Sam Darnold fan club and to watch that performance yesterday. Yeah. Goodness gracious.
Yeah. Unfortunately, flashed a little bit some of the Sam Darnold history.
It felt like the old Sam Darnold. By the way, I thought the Stafford fumble was a fumble, and I thought that was a terrible call and should have been a touchdown for the Vikings. Not sure it would have mattered, but again, make of that what you will. But at halftime of the game, did anybody else see this? Adam Schefter, Dion Sanders, and the Dallas Cowboys. What do we know? And Shefty, very serious, very insider-like, saying, I just talked to Dion Sanders, and Coach Prime would be interested in coaching the Dallas Cowboys. He and Jerry Jones have a good relationship, and there is a possibility they have spoken and that might have some interest in Dion. I'm going to tell you how I knew that this Dion Cowboy thing was real was when Chase McCabe texted me and said, would you take 3 number 1 picks and Dak Prescott for the number 1 pick? I was like, whoa. What? 3 number 1s and Dak? I said, what are we talking about? He said, apparently Dion's interested in the Cowboy job. So let me say this. I have been wrong about things in the past. I will admit that. But I see no way that there is any juice whatsoever to Dion Sanders being the next coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry Jones is cheap. I know because he has an extravagant stadium and he spent on players in the 90s that people think Jerry's not cheap. Jerry is cheap. Jerry did not spend in free agency because Jerry is cheap. Jerry did not give Mike McCarthy a real contract extension offer because Jerry is cheap. So you mean to tell me that Jerry Jones is going to pay the University of Colorado $8 million to buy out Dion Sanders and hire him to be the head coach of the Cowboys? So to me, that's a non-starter. But what I do think is the case in both Dion's case and Jerry's case is they're both addicted to attention. So this is a perfect match for speculation and discussion. So I just want to air that out at the very beginning. I do not think there is any chance Dion Sanders becomes the next coach of the Cowboys. And I guarantee that Dion Sanders will not be the next coach of the Dallas Cowboys. So I just want to put that out there to begin with. Now, there was a report over the weekend that Dion would be interested in being the next coach of the Raiders. With Tom Brady in charge of the Raiders, and it looks like they're circling Ben Johnson to be their guy, I tend to think he's not going to be the coach of the Raiders either. But I think it is more likely that Dion could coach the Raiders, where Mark Davis might be more willing to pay the $8 million, although Mark Davis's big problem is not that he's cheap, it's that he's poor for an NFL owner. But I do think that, again, it's more likely the Raiders than it is the Cowboys. You know, Jerry Jones is the star of the Dallas Cowboys, and Jerry Jones doesn't want anybody else to be the star of the Cowboys. And we've seen 2 separate occasions where Jerry has hired or has had a big-time, big personality, big attention coach. And in both cases, Jimmy Johnson and Bill Parcells, it could only last so long, and then he had to get another lackey in there that would clap their hands on the sidelines like Jason Garrett. And Dion, when you hire Dion, you become the Dallas Dion Sanderses. And I don't think Jerry will ever be interested in that. So again, I don't buy this. I think Jerry's the star. I think he wants a yes man. I think he wants somebody who flies under the radar. I don't think he wants Parcells. I don't think he wants Jimmy Johnson. I think he wants to do it the Jerry way. But I have been wrong before. So if Dion gets one of these jobs, then the questions about Dion and Shadur become legit. Then we can talk about what it would take to get Dak Prescott in a trade for Shadur Sanders. Then we can talk about trading to the Raiders. We can do that. And I think if you're Chad Brinker, you probably have to have a plan of, hey, if one of these teams loves these quarterbacks, here's what we would want in exchange for the pick to allow them to draft one of these quarterbacks. But before I can get to that, before I can tell you what a package for Shadur Sanders would look like to Dallas and you would get Dak Prescott in return, before that, I just have to say, like, and I mean this, I just don't see Dion coaching the Cowboys. I don't see Dion coaching the Cowboys, and I don't see Dak Prescott not being their quarterback. The Raiders, again, I think the Raiders are going to try to be a serious organization. Brady's going to try to act like they're serious. Again, I don't think Brady's the magic elixir to figure out their quarterback issues or their coach issues. But it sounds like they want Ben Johnson. And with New England out and all these other places, you know, Jacksonville's got Trent Baalke there. I don't know if Ben Johnson wants that. I could see Ben Johnson to the Raiders, and then where does Dion go if the Cowboys and the Raiders are out? But I absolutely do think that if Dion does go to the league, if I'm wrong, then the Shadur stuff really becomes legit. Then it becomes legit. But until then, I can't get there. And I can't believe that Jerry Jones, again, is the history of Jerry Jones being cheap and Jerry Jones just valuing the spotlight, that Jerry would actually have interest in Dion Sanders. Like a real, genuine interest in Dion coaching the team. Not that Dion couldn't do it. I don't know if Dion could do it or not. I don't think he could, but I've been wrong about Dion to this point. But that Jerry would cede the attention and the spotlight to Dion, he would never do that. That Jerry would pay $8 million to buy him out of Colorado, he would never do that. That is not Jerry Jones. 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. We'll get to some of your phones. Plus, if the Shadur thing is legit, if Dion does end up, there are a couple deals I'd be willing to make. And let me just say this. Let's not think that Titan pick is as valuable as I think we're going to want to pretend it is. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 1025 The Game.
Dion Sanders is figuring out what's best for him. Is it best to stay in school? His sons are leaving. He's got recruits coming in. Does he want to be there? Does the school look out for him? Does he want to go to Dallas? Does Jerry want to go move in that direction to hire him? You know, again, and I said this to Ty this morning, we were taping my podcast. About 16, 17 months ago, October of 23, a GM in the league called me. He said, get out your pen and paper and write this down. Dion Sanders is going to be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. I'm like, okay, I wrote it down. And I saved some pictures of the two of them for the time when it would become relevant. So last night I'm going through my phone back to October, November of 23. There are the pictures that I've been saving for the day that this GM had told me about this actual event potentially happening. And I think it still could go a lot of ways. The Cowboys are going to go into a coaching search. They may bowl for somebody. They may be impressed with somebody. They may move in the direction that's not Dion related. But it may be that of all the people that they talk with and meet with, nobody impresses or interests them as much as Dion Sanders does. So I think right now they're navigating it. Dion's navigating it. They're both an option for each other, and we'll see where it goes.
Shefty talking about Dion to the Cowboys. And again, I have guaranteed that Dion Sanders will not be the next coach of the Cowboys, and I cannot see it with Jerry. I cannot see Jerry Jones giving Dion the spotlight. I cannot see it. But Shefty's acting like, no. There is some truth to this. There is some reality in this. So Titans fans then see that, and they're like, Jared, what do you think they would trade for Shadur? So let me just say this. If Dion Sanders gets hired by the Cowboys, then the talk about trading Shadur Sanders to Dallas becomes legit. If he gets the Raiders job, then the talk about trading Shadur Sanders to the Raiders becomes legit. But don't you have to be prepared if that happens? Like, Ian, again, I've said I have no interest in really diving into whether or not Dion's going to coach Cowboys, because I don't think Dion's going to coach Cowboys. But if we ran the Titans, don't you think we'd have to be prepared for that day to happen and then for the conversations to start immediately about, hey, all right, Stephen Jones is on line one, wants to talk about the number one pick?
Well, I mean, you have to go through all scenarios, I think.
So here's what I would do in both cases, the Raiders and the Cowboys. Because, again, there was an article in the Las Vegas Review Journal that said Dion would be interested in the Raiders. So let's put them in there too. Number one, the Raiders. Ian, do we want to start with the Raiders or with the Cowboys?
As far as Dion's like hot list?
Well, just I'm talking about what I would want from both sides.
Oh. Let's go the Raiders first.
Okay. Tennessee trades number one to the Raiders for number 6 for a 2026 first, 37, 68, 107, and a 2026 fourth.
So that's 2 firsts.
2 firsts, a second, a third, and 2 fourths.
And 2 fourths. Okay. That's a good amount.
The value of the Raider trade package would be $3,014. The value of the first pick, according to the Draft Tech website, is $3,000. So that is technically a fair trade. The other trade I would accept, number 1 for 6, a 2026 first, and Brock Bowers. I would take Brock Bowers in exchange for the second, third, and 2 fourths.
Okay.
So that would be the deal with the Raiders. And if the Raiders say no to both of them, then say you don't get Shadur. Because, again, imagine how much of a freaking tantrum Dion is going to throw if Dion is the coach of the Raiders and he wants Shadur and he's sitting at 6 and he can't get Shadur.
Oh, he not happy.
So then maybe he forces their hand there. Number 2, if it's Dallas. Now, again, Chase texted me yesterday and was like, Dak and 3 first-round picks for Shadur. And I was like, what? So let's be abundantly clear. Dak Prescott is a better player than Shadur Sanders is supposed to be. Dak Prescott is a better player than Cam Ward is supposed to be. That's just reality. Dak Prescott is not an elite quarterback in the NFL, but again, Blake Bedingfield at paulkarski.com said low first-round grade on Ward, second-round grade on Sanders. Dak Prescott is a top 12 quarterback in the NFL. And Dak is physically in his prime. I think he's about 30 years old, and that means that Dak's got a good 6 or 7 years left. So a fair trade would be Dak for 1-1. But you also have to get a young player in the draft. So here's the deal I would make with the Cowboys. Number 1 overall to Dallas in exchange for Dak Prescott and number 12. And again, number 12 in this draft is not a great pick. You are not getting anybody good. I mean, say anybody good. You are not getting any of the elite prospects that we talk about with the 12th pick. You're not getting Travis Hunter. You're not getting one of the 2 quarterbacks. You're not getting Abdul Carter. You're not getting one of the 2 tackles. You're not getting any of those picks. The corner from Michigan, you're not getting any of those guys if you're sitting there at 12. So, for me, I go with Dak and 12 overall for Sanders. And then with the Raiders, it would be 6, a second, a third, a fourth, a first next year, and a fourth next year in exchange for the number 1 pick. And again, keep that in the desk somewhere in case all of a sudden you see, breaking news, Dion Sanders, coach of the Raiders. Now it's like, okay, let's get into it. But I don't think Dion's going to be coaching the Raiders. And I don't think Dion is absolutely not going to be coaching the Cowboys. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com at 615-737-1025. And I should note that Dak Prescott has a full no-trade clause. So, again, if the Cowboys were to say, okay, we're going to hire Dion Sanders, and again, these are a lot of ifs. If the Cowboys were going to hire Dion Sanders, if Dion Sanders was going to demand that he get to coach Shadur, if, then you have to get to if Dak Prescott were to waive his no-trade clause. And I don't know about you, but I feel like it'd be hard to get Dak to waive his no-trade clause here. That's why you negotiate a no-trade clause. But that would be the deal. Dak and 12 for Shadur Sanders. One texter says, why did Jerry give Dak all that money? Here's why Jerry gave Dak Prescott all the money. Because Jerry knew when Dak signed his last contract, because of the void years, the deal voided before they would be able to put the salary cap, the franchise tag on Dak Prescott. So Dak could not be franchised. And Jerry knew, if I don't sign Dak and he gets out there in free agency, how many teams without quarterbacks are going to be vying for Dak Prescott? Cleveland doesn't have a quarterback. The Giants don't have a quarterback. The Titans don't have a quarterback. Teams like Pittsburgh don't have long-term answers at quarterback. They would be interested in Dak Prescott. And now you're in a bidding war. So that's why Jerry would have to give Dak all that money. But that's why he did it. One texter says the Cowboys are the Lakers of the NFL. Maybe. But the Lakers occasionally win. Dallas hasn't won anything since 1995. Dallas hasn't won anything for 30 years. Texter says, I think it's more likely that the Titans' new general manager fires Brian Callahan and hires Dion Sanders. Again, I don't think I have guaranteed Dion is not going to the Cowboys. Even though Adam Schefter is absolutely banging the drum that it's possible. One texter says, no thank you for Dak. If you watched Dallas this year or last year, no. There is not okay, let's be abundantly clear. There is not a better quarterback out there right now that you can get your hands on than Dak Prescott. And I'm not even a Dak Prescott fan. But you're going to tell Kirk Cousins is not better than Dak Prescott at this point. Those 2 quarterbacks in the draft, they're not as good as Dak Prescott is right now. And they probably never will be. I'm not a Dak Prescott guy either, but again, Dak is better than what you have. Trevor joins us next. What does Trevor think? Does Trevor think Dion's going to leave? Does he think Dion's going to want Shadur? What does he think Shadur's worth if there's a trade? We'll do that all next with Trevor. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I love Hiller. Those are my guys. They take great care of my home, and they can do the exact same for you. In fact, I have Hiller out to my home all of the time. When I need work done, they do it. Hiller has been in business since 1990 and is family owned and operated. And Jimmy Hiller was recently named amongst the most admired CEOs because of the way he truly cares for his team and his clients. And I know this because I know Jimmy Hiller and I use Hiller at my house. Hiller has 100% satisfaction of happy you'll be or the service is free. And again, I know that because I use them. Learn more at happyhiller.com. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, Electrical, proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, call that fish truck today. Stillman and Company live from Bridgestone Arena. And again, the rumors, Dion Sanders and the Cowboys. What's that mean for Shadur? There was one over the weekend in the Las Vegas Review Journal saying Dion would be interested in the Raiders job. And Adam Schefter was not saying, it's all speculation at this point, but it's not. Adam Schefter was the one reporting Dion and the Cowboys have talked. And with that, Trevor Maddich joins us from ESPN, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. So, Trevor, let's start there. What do people inside the college game think about this Dion Sanders Dallas, Dion Sanders Raiders, Dion Sanders Colorado? Because, again, with the Titans holding the first pick and Shadur going in the draft, there become a lot of interesting conversations if Dion takes a pro job. So what do you think, and what do most people in college ball seem to think about this?
Well, I think most people in college ball think that Dion would be fantastic in either place, but because of his credibility as an NFL Hall of Famer, he could move NFL players. And they would do what he says because he's got that instant credibility. I think Dion would be better in college because I think his advantage in attracting NIL money over what most other college coaches could do would give him a huge, right now at Colorado, that's one of the reasons they're able to bring in so many of the top transfers and just restock with transfers all the time, because people with money want to be around Prime. They want to hang out with him. They want to do lunches with him. They want to have private audiences with him. And the more money you donate to NIL, the more of that you get with the superstar head coach. If it's not a superstar head coach, then it's mildly interesting. It's fine. It's fun. But it's different when you have a major celebrity that you grew up watching and revering as one of your heroes. In the NFL, you don't have that advantage because you've got cap space and that's about it, right? But in college, if your coach can get more NIL money than the next coach, and certainly in the Big 12, the biggest superstar head coach is Dion Sanders, then he's in a position, I think, if he stays in college, to have an advantage over his competitors that he would not necessarily have to that degree if he goes to the NFL. And that's why I think I'm a little different from what most people think, but I think his chances for success are greater in college because of that comparative advantage.
Trevor, do you think what you know of Dion Sanders, that if he got a job, whether it was the Raiders or the Cowboys, that he would almost demand that he'd be able to have Shadur Sanders as his quarterback? Or do you think Shadur could be on another team and Dion would be fine with Dak Prescott or whomever the Raiders roll out there at quarterback?
I think that, Dion would prefer to be coaching his son. He's already coached him on two different levels, FCS and then now at the FBS level, the Power 4 level at Colorado, and now going into the NFL. I mean, what a story that would be. And I'm sure he would love to do it, and I'm sure Shadur would love that to happen. At the same time, I'm not sure that they could guarantee that they could get it, because the Raiders sit at number 6, Cowboys sit at number 12, and I don't know that either one of them has enough firepower to get all the way up into the top 2, and maybe they would have to be in the top 1. That would be fantastic for the Titans if that were the case. If the Raiders said, look, we're going to move heaven and earth, we're going to make a deal with the Titans, Coach Prime. This is the deal we're going to make. We've already approached them with it. The Titans have accepted the deal. You're going to get Dion with the number 1 pick. And if you come here to the Raiders, now, if that all happens before the draft, which it likely would, it would be the best of all worlds, I think, for the Titans. I think Shadur is a very good risk of being successful in the NFL. In other words, the yes or no, it's a coin flip. First-round quarterbacks are basically a 50-50 risk. I think he's a very good risk that he will be successful in the league. At the same time, for the Raiders to go from 6 to 1, or the Cowboys especially from 12 to 1, are you kidding? For the Titans, they'd be able to restock their roster for a long time to come with guys that have a higher probability of success in the league than a first-round quarterback. And so if I'm a Titans fan, I am hoping against hope that what you just said, Jarrett, comes to pass, that either the Raiders or the Cowboys make a deal with Dion, contingent that they make a deal with the Titans first to be able to move up to the number 1 pick.
So to that point, Trevor Maddich with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics. To that point, Titan fans feel entitled to just a boatload of picks. if there's a deal for Shadur. And I do think to a certain extent, there's probably it's fair, I think, to expect that. Again, the value, I did the math, the value for the Raiders to get from 6 to 1 would be 6, their first rounder next year, their second rounder, third rounder, fourth rounder, and a fourth rounder in next year's draft in order to equal the value of the first pick. But then there's the Cowboys. And I want your opinion on this, Trevor, because again, I haven't, studied Shadur Sanders and Cam Ward, but if I had to pick a quarterback and my option was Dak Prescott or Shadur Sanders or Cam Ward, personally, I would take Dak Prescott. And I am not a Dak Prescott guy. I think Dak Prescott is an okay quarterback, and if Dak has a good team around him, he'll be good, but he ultimately probably can't ever win the Super Bowl. But Dak is an in his prime NFL starter. He's led the league in passing, and I hear that Shadur Sanders might have a second-round grade. So to me, I think, okay, if you're going to make a deal and you're going to get Dak Prescott in return, you're actually getting the better player in this deal. So to me, all I could expect is the first-round pick at 12 that Dallas has with Dak for Shadur, and Titan fans think that that's not fair. What is fair when putting Dak Prescott, Trevor, into this conversation?
I think that I would prefer, as somebody thinking about the Titans, to get all those extra draft picks than to bring in Dak Prescott. The reason is, you're right, he's an NFL starter in his prime. It'll cost you a lot of money to keep that guy around and to pay him, Dak. But at the same time, a few years from now, when some of your younger players are coming into their own, Dak will possibly be on his last legs. I don't know how old he is, but I would rather have the younger guys and then maybe bring in another guy that would be either less expensive or wouldn't take away the opportunity of having more draft picks in the trade rather than have Dak included in the trade. And there'll be some veteran quarterbacks available that might not be as flashy as Dak, but at the same time, it depends on what your long-term vision is. I'm with you. I think Dak Prescott is a very good quarterback. He has had outstanding receivers at Dallas. He has had outstanding offensive lines at Dallas. He's had Tony Pollard, running back at Dallas. He's been pretty good at running back. And yet he hasn't been able to carry them deep into the playoffs. So I don't know how much of that is Dak, how much of that is coaching, how much of that is just culture. I don't know. But I wouldn't necessarily bring in Dak unless I thought Dak was the final missing piece. I'd rather have the extra building blocks of all those draft choices if given the choice.
But at that point, you get all these draft choices. Who's your quarterback going to be?
Well, it would probably be somebody like Kirk Cousins or somebody along those lines. I don't think Sam Darnold, the Vikings, will be available. My thought is that they'll do something, the Vikings will, to make sure that he's there to back up J.J. McCarthy, because McCarthy was their first-round draft choice in this last draft out of Michigan, national champion. But then he got hurt and missed the whole season. And so he's coming in as a rookie quarterback, and he may be able to stay healthy, and he may be as good as advertised. But it's always good to have a quality veteran as a backup when you're breaking in a rookie quarterback like that. So I don't know that he'll be available. But it would need to be somebody like Cousins. The thing you got to realize, though, is that we all agree that you need high-level quarterback play in order to go deep in the playoffs and elite quarterback play in order to win the Super Bowl. The question is, at what cost? And the other question is, do you just take the best possible guy this year? Or if that guy isn't really here that you believe in, do you not invest in that guy and you invest other places and you wait another year to see if there's a better option to invest in? A lot of people have said, the first one I've heard say, it was Dan Orlovsky on ESPN, that the problem is not paying elite players big money. It's paying good players elite player money. That's the problem, because then you crowd out other guys that are better from the salary cap perspective. And so, that's why I'm not saying Dak is wrong. I'm just saying if I have a choice between swapping a first-round pick, number 12 for number 1, and then have Dak, I don't know that that's nearly enough for me if I am the Titans, because they need more than a quarterback and a 12th-round pick in order to get deep into the playoffs of the Super Bowl. And if that's the case, why give up potential extra draft choices if you're going to trade down to fill in more parts of the team for the future when you're not going to the Super Bowl anyway with Dak at number 12?
Trevor Maddich is with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, where experience matters. Mel Kiper's latest big board is out, and I think it's something Titan fans want to hear, but I think it's a hedge. We'll get into that with Trevor next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game. Trevor Maddich is with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. So Mel Kiper's big board is back up. He's got his latest big board, which was last updated. Okay, so I saw that it was updated, I think, on Friday, and Mel has updated it, Ian. I'm a little surprised by this.
Fun.
So Mel has updated it, and he keeps the quarterbacks in the same spot. He's got Shadur Sanders at 4 and Cam Ward at 5. Now, again, we've heard, Blake Bedingfield said he's got a low first-round grade in a traditional draft, a low first-round grade on Cam Ward, and a second-round grade on Shadur Sanders, but this is supposedly a weak draft. He has, Mel does, Travis Hunter, number 1, Abdul Carter, number 2, Mason Graham, number 3, Shadur, 4, Cam Ward, 5, Will Johnson, 6. Trevor Maddich is with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics. So, Trev, let's start there. Do you really think that Shadur Sanders is the 4th best player in this draft, or that Cam Ward is the 5th best player in this draft? Do you think those guys are that good and have really shot up that high, or do you think Mel is hedging his bets that an NFL team is going to pick those guys that high because they're the best quarterbacks and the quarterbacks are going to go high?
They get extra credit for being quarterbacks. You mentioned that some people have a second-round grade on Shadur, but it doesn't really matter. There's only 2 quarterbacks you would even consider taking in the first round in this draft, and Shadur and Cam Ward are those 2 guys. And so do I think, just from a standpoint of pure talent at any position, that those are the 4th and 5th best in the draft? No, absolutely not. But they do get the extra credit because of quarterback, and I think they'll both go in the top 5.
So when it comes to a player on Mel's big board that's a little bit further down, like let's use Luther Burden III at Missouri, who's 21st on Mel's big board. Do you think those 2 players are better than Luther Burden at Missouri? Or do you think that, again, if we're just saying forget about positions, just out of 100, do you think Luther Burden is a better player than the 2 quarterbacks that, again, to your point, they're going to go high?
Yeah, overall, sure. But that's in a hypothetical world. In the world we live in, those quarterbacks are good enough to be considered, top 5, top 7 draft picks just because of the position that they play in, the competition that there is from the other quarterbacks in this draft. And so, yeah, if you just say who's the most talented guy, I would say Burden. But those are 2 very good quarterbacks, and one of them at least is going to have a good NFL career. I would guess that Shadur would have the best chance, but it's possible they both do. That's the problem with taking a quarterback. It's a 50-50 flip. You know what the best odds are for getting a rookie first-round draft choice to his second contract with the same team that drafted him is guard. Center's up there high as well. So quarterbacks are way down.
Good news for Mike Vrabel. He loves taking guards high in the draft. Trevor Maddich with us on the program. To that point, if you're on the clock with the first pick, you're the Titans. You have the first pick, nobody calls. We know they need a quarterback. Do you take one of the 2 quarterbacks, or do you take Travis Hunter?
I take Travis Hunter because I am fairly certain, upwards of 95% that he's going to be an impact player on either side of the ball, and probably both sides of the ball when you use them in packages. And so I would take Travis Hunter first. Now, having said that, I would be stunned if the Titans did not take one of the 2 quarterbacks, Shadur or Cam. But if it were me, I would take Hunter.
Do you think if you made that pick, and I know that Trevor, I think it's probably fair to say you have a little bit of a bias against rookie quarterbacks, but if this were your one shot as GM and you knew, hey, I've got 3 years and we know it's all tied to the quarterback, and would you could you risk your career on Shadur Sanders or Cam Ward?
I wouldn't want to, but I kind of tend to think that in that room that Coach Brian Callahan will make that risk. And the reason is that if you take the quarterback and he doesn't work out, well, you're in trouble. You're not going anywhere anyhow. But if you take somebody like a Travis Hunter and you don't take Shadur or Cam Ward, and one of those 2 guys, because you could have either one of them, one of those 2 guys, if not both, turns into what Jaden Daniels for the Commanders became this year, which is Offensive Rookie of the Year, certainly, then you also are in a lot of trouble because people will then say, look, you could have taken the top quarterback who's going to be a Pro Bowler for the next decade, and you didn't take him. And so you're really messed. You're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. And so I think that they will go with the safer choice from a political standpoint, which would be take quarterback.
Trevor, do you think Greg Sankey regrets how much he pushed for a 12-team college football playoff with there being no SEC team in the championship?
No, but who would have guessed that, right? I mean, the Big Ten had 4 teams in the 12, and the SEC only had 3. And then the last one remaining was the new guy from the Big 12, Texas. And then now in the final, there's no one in from the SEC. And I don't know, you probably could have made a lot of money if you picked at the start of the season, there would be no SEC teams in the championship game because I think that stuns a lot of people. But I think the 12-team playoff has been phenomenal for college football up and down the line, not just for the likes of the Boise States and Arizona States that otherwise wouldn't have had a chance to get into the playoff. And certainly the Arizona State took Texas to 2 overtimes. I mean, they had a chance to win that and go on to the next one. But also at the top, because look what it's given us now. You talk about the SEC teams that are not there, and you and I have talked all season, Jared, about how the teams at the top, the blue blood teams from the SEC, the Georgias, the Alabamas of the world, have flaws that are deeper than we can remember in recent years. Well, all of a sudden now the 12-team playoff has given us Ohio State, which has got to be the most talented team top to bottom, and then Notre Dame, which may be the most deserving team in all of college football. Now, Notre Dame has a bunch of injuries. They lost 2 offensive linemen in during the last game, the Penn State playoff game. One of them will probably come back and play banged up. But absent that, Ohio State against Notre Dame entering that game, if that's not one of the highest rated college football games of all time, I don't know what is. And the 12-team playoff has given us all of this.
Does Notre Dame have a shot Monday night?
No, they really don't, and it's because of the injuries. I mean, the problem is their best running back, Jeremiah Love, has been working on a banged up knee, and he's been fairly effective even with that knee, but he's not himself. You know, their starting left tackle is out, and he will be out for the duration. So he's one of the guys that got hurt against Penn State. The starting right guard will probably play, but play banged up, and I think that alone is a real problem. And then you got the fact that the receivers for Notre Dame are not terribly scary. The special teams and defense for the Irish are going to have to win this game. Well, if Ohio State is on their game, then I don't see anywhere that Notre Dame has an advantage, but I see plenty of places where Ohio State has an advantage. And so I think the Buckeyes are going to win this by at least 2 scores.
Trevor Matich, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, great stuff. We'll talk next week.
Thanks, Jared.
Yep, Trevor Matich on our program. Barry Trotz, Predators general manager, will join us coming up. Stillman and Company, we are live from Bridgestone Arena, 102.5 and 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, and we are presented by Southern Bank here on the program. And it is 5 o'clock on a Tuesday. We are joined by Predators General Manager Barry Trotz. Barry, how are you?
I'm good.
So let's get right into it. There was a report that came out from Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet saying that Ryan O'Reilly could be a potential trade target for other teams. Granted, we know the season hasn't gone the way that the Predators have wanted it to go, that Ryan O'Reilly could be a potential trade target for other teams, but that despite the fact that he has no trade protection, the Predators, according to the Elliot Friedman report, would be willing to treat O'Reilly as if he does have trade protection. I want to ask you, number one, is that report true? And is there talk about trading Ryan O'Reilly?
No, I haven't had I know I'm going to get asked about Ryan O'Reilly. I think what he brings to our franchise is what every team wants. And, I brought Ryan here for a reason. Wanted to continue with the culture that we had and try to improve on it even better. He's done everything I've asked. He's he's a guy that we said, we want to transition. We felt we had a little bit of a window, want to transition to some of the younger guys. Anytime you have a Ryan O'Reilly in your club, that always helps the younger guys as well. So he doesn't have trade protection, but it would have to be something that would knock my socks off for me to do something, and I'd have to get a pretty good player back if I were to do something. I think out of respect to Ryan, because I really respect him as a person and a player, that if I was to do anything, I would probably talk to him first.
Is it the kind of thing where you would tell other teams, hey, if you want to call about Ryan O'Reilly, we have to talk to him first? Or is it the kind of thing where you'd like to do that, but if the knocking of the socks is so strong that you may make the deal without his blessing?
What I have to do is do what's best for the Nashville Predators, plain and simple. So I want to do it. If we have to do anything, it has to be in a respectful way to the player, any of our players, if we do anything with them.
Have you started taking trade deadline calls? I mean, again,
we
the
were
buyers and the sellers kind of thing.
That's really going to happen probably in the next. I'm going to say 2 weeks here. I just got back today from Florida with our winter meetings with all our scouts, talking to a number of other general managers. They are either on the same time frame we were. They're just coming back from their meetings, and then the other half of the league is just going into their meetings. So I think we're going to start. Teams are going to, after their meetings, their pro meetings, their amateur meetings, they're going to sort of have a game plan. Okay, let's start figuring out what's out there, who's going to be moving people, who are those people, and let's sort of get a game plan. So we're going to be answering phones from, all 32 teams. I'm going to make some calls because there might be a deal that makes sense for us as well.
So when you meet with these people and you have your organizational meetings at this point in the year, what exactly is the point of that?
Well, the meetings are number one. On the amateur side is to bring all our scouts together. We have an idea of what the draft looks like. So we were preparing in terms of the types of players, our needs, who are those players that we must have a lot of coverage in, and players that are trending up and down, and putting together a Nashville list. I think Central Scouting list came out either today or yesterday, and they'll start comparing some of those looks and see if there's anybody that we need to see more. Some people that we trend, their list, other lists will be different, and so they'll get into that. And also we talked about and our pro scouts are identifying the direction I'd like to go from now till the trade deadline or beyond, and into the next year and into the next 4 years. So we try to plan out that far, but it's everything is can change very quickly on a deal. So we just talked about a lot about our core players, guys that we want to keep going forward, guys that we may have duplicate in terms of profiles. So all those things go into it. How we do it, why we do it, any questions that needs to be answered or asked at that meeting are asked, and then they're out doing their thing. Our scouts work hard, and they're out there a lot. They've done a really good job, considering that the Preds haven't drafted really high in probably a dozen years now.
What have you told the pro scouts you're looking for?
For us, for us going forward, I'm looking for someone who's maybe in that 2-year window, maybe a veteran player that has some. I don't want any rentals. I want someone that has a little bit of term. But I can't have too much term because we got a lot of kids coming.
Okay, Barry Trotz is with us on the program. I do wonder this. Is the plan to be good next season? Again, I know you want to win every game the rest of the way, but I looked it up today. I think you guys have a 2.2% chance of making the playoffs.
Yeah.
So let's forget about this year. But is the plan like, hey, take the L this year, move on, get a high draft pick. Hopefully that guy becomes, a superstar, but move on after this year with the same core you've got now and be good next year the way you thought you were going to be good this year?
Well, I think where we are, we thought we would be really good, and we didn't have a lot of guys with any career years here, so we're having trouble scoring goals, which I'd never. That was probably the last thing I thought we would have to worry about. So be better. I think have an identity that is a predator identity. I think this year we've lost a little bit of that. We try to get back to that a little bit. Get our, that sense of finding ways to win. I thought this year we've found too many ways to lose points rather than find points. Good example of that. You look at Wash this year; they're having a terrific year. Everything's going their way, just like everything went our way last year. I thought I watched the game from Florida, and watching us play, there was no quit. Guys were on the puck. They were creating chances. They were doing everything defensively that you wanted, and then we found a way not to get a save. Found a way to not win that hockey game, even though I thought we, analytically, if you looked at it, it was probably like a 75-25 game for us, but we didn't win. On the other side, Washington's having one of those years that they're just finding ways to win, and we've got to get back to that. A little bit of the confidence, but at the same time, a little bit of bite, a little bit of snarl. So that type of thing is we'll get back on track. We're going to always infuse some more young kids into our lineup, so that is the unknown. That you want someone to, take the next step. But as we've seen over time, a guy will come into the league, have a little bit of a pop. We expect more next year, and then you take a step backwards, and hopefully take one step backwards, 2 steps forward. So we're going to have some young guys, and you're starting to see like the Svechkovs and those type of guys coming up and getting a little taste of it this year.
Have you performed at least a little bit of an autopsy so far on why this season has gone the route that it has? And if so, what has been kind of the takeaway of, okay, this is what has to get better, or this was a misstep that we made?
Well, I think, yeah, we're going to do an autopsy. I think right now to give you a full autopsy halfway through the year is probably not appropriate at this time. But I do look back at some things, and we can discuss those in the future. We'll look at doing things a little bit differently. Everything from the start, everything from training camp, everything the personnel wise, all those type of things are going to go into a deep dive for sure. We're doing it, at the halfway mark here. We're going to do it at the end of the season. Everything's going to get evaluated I'm going to reevaluate everything I did. I'm doing that now. I'm going to reevaluate the coaching staff. I'm going to reevaluate our decision making and our personnel, so that at the end of the year we can take a step forward.
I do wonder about the whole evaluating what you did and what you want to do going forward. How much of that do you have to do right now, given the fact that the trade deadline season is coming up? And you brought up talking with the scouts. I'm sure a discussion was had about, okay, how do we feel about this draft and where the strengths are in this draft? So if you're trading something and you're getting a 2025 draft choice, what are the strengths of that compared to the 2026 draft, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to, again, an autopsy is usually for at the end of the year, but again, how much have you had to kind of reevaluate the process, knowing that there is a player and asset acquisition season that is upcoming here very quickly?
Yeah, I think every draft, there's core players that every draft has. I think this year's draft, I think the Schaefer kid is probably the one player. He's not a center iceman. He's a defenseman that's probably separated himself from the group. You look at 2 years ago, there was 3 or 4 guys. There was Carlson and Smith and Bedard and people like that are coming out all the time. There was like 4 or 5 of them. So this year, I think there's probably 5, and then there's another grouping of maybe 20. But every year, if you look through the history of the draft, probably the last 20 years, no matter if the scouts say it's a good draft or bad draft, there's always a group of core players that have to play in the National Hockey League and are really good players for you. So, next year, if you talk to some scouts, they always say next year will be even better, or next year, because of the top end talent. But usually in the draft can be deeper if there's not as much top end talent. So if you look at what we've done, we have a lot of prospects coming. In Milwaukee, we have a lot of prospects that are in junior or college or playing over in Europe. We have a glut of them, and we have a lot of picks this year. So if you look at, for instance, next year, we've pared back some of our picks. So anytime that you see me make a deal and you're wondering, well, why is he going for 2027? If you have too many kids coming in really quickly, you don't have enough time to place them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very conscious of trying to give us an extra window, because we're going to have a glut of players, young players that are going to come out. They're going to want to play on our team at some point. And the window is smaller. The window used to be, 4 or 5 years. It's just gotten smaller over time here. And that's because of the agents. That's because of the setup of the National Hockey League and I think just the development of the players. They're more skilled and probably a little bit more prepared than they were in the past. But at the same time, they're still boys and they're not men. And you see some of the young players in the league, they get off to maybe good starts and then they struggle. And that's just a physical thing, a mental thing. You talk to any Milwaukee player, one thing a Milwaukee player will tell you, they play usually a little bit more on the weekend. Probably 2-3 games. They play a lot more back-to-backs. So they get wound up for a weekend, just like college does. But the NHL grind is not like that. We do have back-to-backs, but you play, travel, and you never really get a break. So it's Groundhog Day, and that takes a certain mentality to get up and stay in the zone and be good every night, where the Milwaukee players can actually take a day or two off, sort of catch their breath, and then they go at it again. So it's just a little different mindset. And that's the same with the college players. And probably the closest thing would be more of the junior players that play more national schedule.
Barry Trotz is with us on the program. How is this upcoming trade season going to be similar or different from when you first got here? David Poile was still the general manager.
Mm-hmm.
That team went into the year with expectations. That team wasn't meeting expectations. And that team had probably a better argument to try to hang on if they wanted to, and they didn't. And then all of a sudden, Jeannot goes out, and Granlund goes out, and Ekholm goes out, and a whole bunch of guys go out, and picks and prospects come in. How similar or different do we expect this upcoming trade season to be?
It'd probably be a little different. I think most of a lot of the house cleaning that I've done already, in terms of that, I think that was the big blow up. That was we're going to start from ground zero, thinking that we would be picking really a real high pick that year. That didn't happen. If you remember, it was game 81 when we got eliminated. We hung in there. We got great goaltending. We had great sort of buy-in from the players that came up and the existing players that were still here. Last year, I said we could have a lot of pain, thinking that we didn't have it the year before. And we had all those three versions. As I said, we got off to a slow start, 5-10, and looked like we were going to have some pain. And then all of a sudden we went on a run, and I was going to be in a sell mode for a month. I was making calls and saying, hey, this is the direction we're probably going to go because we're probably not going to be there. We went on a tear and a heater, and all of a sudden I'm picking up guys. I'm picking up Zucker and Beauvillier and people like that, adding some people. So this year is probably going to be more, we'll be answering the phones. I might move a player or two here. And if we can, help our team in any way possible for next year, I will do that.
What have the conversations, Barry Trotz, with us on the program, what have the conversations been like with Bill Haslam and ownership? Again, Bill's new to this, in the ownership chair. And there were a lot of expectations and there was a lot of money that was spent. And clearly at this point in the year, it is what it is. You guys are 2.2% share. What have the conversations about shifting the discussion and shifting the goals for the season and off season, and what has that been like?
Well, they've been really good. I sometimes, as I said, I can't explain the unexplainable, but I think everything we did, our intentions were we had to fix, the back end a little bit with adding a guy in terms of that, adding Shea for McDonough type of thing. And then adding a little more pop for our lineup because we just needed a buffer 2 years here where I felt that our guys in Milwaukee need that time. They need, they needed some time in Milwaukee, get some time here, and be able to move on. So the plan hasn't really changed. It's just been expedited a little bit. There's no question I'm disappointed in where we sit right now, but at the same time we're in a unique position where we still have a lot of good pieces. We have lots of prospects and we have lots of draft choices. That's going to take some time, and we might end up with a really high pick here that could be a game changer for us. So, we're trying to take the positive of a tough season to this point.
But for me to embrace the positive of what you're talking about, this high draft choice, you have to lose a lot of games in the future, and I know you don't want to do that. So
it's a balance. It just is.
Like if I told you right now, you could settle for out of court right now, you get the number one pick, but the rest of the year is going to be absolutely miserable and you're going to lose 75% of the games the rest of the way. Would you take that, or would you rather lose 50% of the games and pick 10?
I think for me, culture trumps everything. So I would probably take number 2, which sounds crazy, but I think culture always trumps. You build a culture, you build a team that doesn't accept losing. Because once you accept losing, it is hard to change the narrative. It just is. And so I would probably take the second door if I had the choice.
Okay, what if Connor McDavid was in this draft? Like if this was the legit freaking super stud draft, like the one Bedard, a couple years ago. Would you rather lose 75% of the games and pick first, or lose 50% and pick 10?
I would probably say that would something that you would have to ask someone else or the ownership, because they would probably give me the direction on that one. But I'm not going to, that's a hypothetical, so I can't go there. But nice try.
We do hypotheticals all the time. It's sports radio. Okay, last one for you. Barry Trotz is with us. Everybody has been dying to know this. What music did you listen to in the car on your way over here to the arena today?
What music?
It's serious stuff, Barry.
I didn't really listen to any music per se. I was actually catching up with the NHL Network, to be honest with you. But I will tell you, I'm a big fan of Noah Kahn, his stuff. So anytime that I'm just driving or whatever, if there's a Noah Kahn's right up there, Stapleton's up there. So those are my go-tos.
By the way, this Noah Kahn, I never heard of him. Apparently he had a concert, and every single woman I follow on Instagram went to the concert. Other than that, I couldn't tell you anything about him, but that's great. Barry Trotz, as always, on our program. Barry, thank you so much. Good luck, and we'll talk soon.
All right, take care.
Stillman and Company, we continue 102.5 The Game. There you go, Barry Trotz just on our program talking about the trade season. Ian, I don't think it's an accident that Barry Trotz, they got all the scouts together last week in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And they sat down and they discussed like, hey, like here's our organizational plan because they're probably getting ready for trade season. And there's no walking around this. I mean, again, we asked Barry, this has been a bad season. And, you know, he does not want to actively root for losing. I have no problem with that. I want the number one pick. I want that kid out of Boston College who was on the first line for Team USA. Is it Hagens? I want him. So go ahead and draft him number 1 overall or number 2 overall. Draft him and put him on the line next year with Stamkos and Marchessault, and let's go. That is what I want. Barry would not come out and say, though, that he was actively rooting for them to lose. But, again, you can't tell me, like, hey, you know, this has been a tough year, but we're going to get a good draft choice. Well, you have to lose in order to get the better draft choice. So keep that in mind. But, again, the big thing that came out of that interview was the O'Reilly thing, saying that it would have to be a deal that knocks his socks off, but saying that he would talk it through with Ryan O'Reilly while ultimately saying he would make the move without trade protection that would be in the best interest of the Predators themselves. So keep that in mind. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number on the program. That's 615-737-1025. So yesterday, somebody might have actually made the future easier for Chad Brinker and his handpicked GM, whoever that is. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game.
So Matthew Stafford, a Super Bowl winning quarterback, is going to come into the game and execute the victory formation, sadly, at the expense of the Minnesota Vikings, who will finish the season 14-4.
There you go. Last night's game. What a dud. What a dud last night. It was a dud of a wild card weekend.
Yeah, it was.
But I was expecting better last night. I'm not going to lie. I was expecting better from the Vikings last night. The Rams were displaced, and they weren't in LA, and they went on the road to Arizona. Meanwhile, Minnesota doesn't have anything. They just get on and they just go. I thought that was going to be advantage Minnesota. Ended up being advantage Rams. And the Rams defense, absolutely stymied Sam Darnold. The offensive line for Minnesota was atrocious, but Darnold was awful and held onto the ball too long, and it felt very Will Levis-esque last night watching the game. And that is with Justin Jefferson on his team. It was a very disappointing performance. But let me say this. This might actually be good news for Chad Brinker and whomever his handpicked general manager ends up becoming. And I'm going to tell you why. Because the supply and demand at the quarterback position right now, going into this offseason, is at a point where the demand is outweighing the supply. There are not 32 starting caliber quarterbacks to go around. So everybody who's got a quarterback right now, they feel fine. They're like, okay, good. We don't have to worry like the teams that don't. And that even includes the quarterbacks that I don't love, like Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville or Tua in Miami or whomever. But all those teams know we have a starting quarterback. Arizona, Kyler Murray, we have a starting quarterback. San Francisco, Brock Purdy, we have a starting quarterback. Tennessee, it ain't Will Levis, and you know it. And so last night, Sam Darnold, who at one point was in the MVP discussion, who if they hadn't changed the rules because the media got butthurt with the media that they picked Joe Flacco as comeback player of the year over DeMar Hamlin, if that hadn't happened, Sam Darnold would be the comeback player of the year. And yet, Sunday Night Football in the grand finale, he looked like Sam Darnold with the Jets. Playoffs against the Rams, he looked like Sam Darnold that first year in Carolina. And now there are questions about what will happen to Sam Darnold. Now there are questions about, do the Vikings franchise tag Sam Darnold? Do the Vikings go forward with J.J. McCarthy? When they drafted J.J. McCarthy in the first round this year, they knew, I think they used the 10th overall pick on him. They knew when they drafted J.J. McCarthy that, hey, this guy was going to be our future quarterback. Then Sam Darnold had the season that he had, and it was like, well, hold on, maybe now we need to reassess. But after the last two games, Minnesota has to reassess again. So how many quarterbacks are out there right now? Derek Carr is a name that gets bandied about a lot. But I actually think Derek Carr stays in New Orleans. So that's not an option. Daniel Jones, Justin Fields, Mac Jones, etc. Those guys, those guys haven't started for entire seasons and done the things that Sam Darnold did this past year. Although I guess technically Mac Jones made the playoffs one year and was a Pro Bowler, and Daniel Jones made the playoffs one year and beat Minnesota. So I guess maybe it would be similar. I don't know. But 2 weeks ago, it looked like a sure thing, slam dunk, lead pipe lock that Sam Darnold was going to be franchise tagged by the Vikings and that Sam Darnold was going to be the backup quarterback at worst for Minnesota next year, but most likely the starter with J.J. McCarthy behind him. Now, after the last two, it at least becomes a discussion. And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say, well, I don't want Sam Darnold now, Jared. I don't want Sam Darnold now. Let me say this. Sam Darnold is still better than what you have. And the question you have to ask yourself, if you're evaluating this and you're being fair and you're being honest, which a lot of people struggle with, a lot of people in the NFL talk themselves into things because it makes them feel better. Will Levis and the Titans ownership and front office last year is an example of that. I hear people doing that with Drake May right now. Vrabel's got his guy at quarterback. I mean, he better hope. But Drake May was the third pick, and he won one game last year. Remember when Vrabel took over the Titans, Mariota was his guy. So those things do change. But again, there are about 7 teams that don't have quarterbacks. Titans don't have a quarterback. Browns don't have a quarterback. Giants don't have a quarterback. Raiders don't have a quarterback. Jets don't have a quarterback. So that's 5 off the top of my head that do not have a quarterback. And how many guys are out there that are legitimate options to start? 2 in the draft. Sam Darnold, who, again, might not actually make it to free agency. And then after that, it's Aaron Rodgers, Daniel Jones, Mac Jones, Justin Fields, Russell if he comes available. This is why Sean Payton drafted Bo Nix with the 12th overall pick. When people were like, oh, no, that's too early. We had him ranked as a second rounder. Sean Payton looked at it and said, he's accurate enough to be my guy. I'm going to take him because I got to have a quarterback. So again, I ask of you, did last night's performance, did the season finale, did that put Sam Darnold back on the chopping block? Because again, life for Chad Brinker and company becomes a lot easier if Darnold is a legitimate option. Why? Because it gives you somebody you can sign, and it doesn't force you to take one of these 2 quarterbacks if you don't necessarily believe in one of these 2 quarterbacks. Now, that being said, if you want me to shoot you completely straight, I still think Darnold's getting franchised. And I think what Darnold did with the last 2 weeks, if anything affected his stock, I think what he did was he probably cost himself a contract. So he's probably going to get franchise tagged, and he's probably going to play on the tag next year, with Minnesota knowing that if he has another great season, then they can give him the contract and he'll still only be 29 years old. So I still don't think Darnold will get out there, but at least after the last night's performance, there's a chance that Sam Darnold gets out there. Also, Kirk Cousins is an option if you're a quarterback needy team. And I do wonder where Ryan Tannehill is. If, again, there's 5 jobs, 2 quarterbacks that are in the draft, so now 3 jobs. Russell stays in Pittsburgh. I do wonder if Tannehill gets himself in the mix for one of these jobs after sitting out a year, or maybe Tannehill's done. 615-737-1025. We do have an update on the Titans coaching search. Peter Schrager, coaching GM, Peter Schrager at Fox Sports and Monday Morning or Good Morning Football.
NFL
whatever
Network.
Yeah, whatever the hell. Says, quote, the Titans are running an efficient general manager search. They did a rather quick first round of interviews. They now have 6 finalists for the second round, solid names across the board. And with the Jets and Raiders GM searches going on as well, I'd imagine an offer/solution within the next week. I'm going to tell you why I think there's going to be a solution pretty quickly. Because I think it's going to be John Eric Sullivan, and I think this is who Brinkers wanted the whole time. And now that the Packers are eliminated, he can hire John Eric Sullivan tomorrow. And I think he'll do all the interviews. Terrence Gray and Ed Dodds today. I believe it's Ian Cunningham and Mike Borgonzi the next day. And then John, what's the guy's last name? Spytek and John Eric Sullivan after that. I think it's probably going to be John Eric Sullivan. Why? Because I think it kind of looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, and it seems to be a duck. Again, this was TD yesterday on the midday show. Ian, if you could. This was TD yesterday talking about Chad Brinker's Packer influence and what he's looking for in the organization going forward.
I haven't heard anything, frankly, about how the interviews went. So I'm not going to sit here and say anything about that. But I do know going into it, I know that just in talking to Chad Brinker and talking to Berg Nihil on the call that they made, there's a huge emphasis on the Packers, right? And being able to bring that culture of drafting and developing. I would say the retain part is they want to be a little bit different because the Packers haven't quite retained a lot of their free agents. But nevertheless, they want to draft and develop and build from the draft and be kind of judicial free agent wise. So Chad Brinker is very much a follower and believer in that philosophy. So you're going to see that quote unquote lockstep there if he were to get the job. I personally believe that he is the favorite. And just from some things that I've gathered, he is the favorite. But then you still have the opportunity to bring some other. There will be another hire or two in order to get that Packer situation in the.
So that was TD talking about, hey, again, it's going to be Packer. Then it sounds like they're going to hire John Eric Sullivan. And I think that, again, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it feels like it's kind of a duck. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. One texter says, if it's John Eric Sullivan, there's no disputing that PK carries water for Chad Brinker after putting that article out right after the firing. If it's John Eric Sullivan, I'm going to talk about that at length. That at 11:40 a.m., PK had a story out about some random guy nobody had ever heard of from the Green Bay Packers being the next general manager of the Titans. If that is, in fact, who they hire. And I'm sure Paul will go on the morning show tomorrow and he'll say, well, I got very good sources that you don't know who my sources are. And I don't know. But again, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, what have we learned on this program? Vrabel's the Patriots coach. It's a duck. So, if 2 hours after Rand Carthon is fired, Paul Kaharski has two stories up. One, Rand Carthon was lazy, which was the first story Paul had up. And two, John Eric Sullivan's going to be the first call for GM. And they hire John Eric Sullivan? I mean, it's hard. Is it hard to figure out which team Paul's on? Come on now. What are we talking about? One texter says, Sam Darnold is nothing but Ryan Tannehill. The next texter says, being better than what we have is not saying much, to be fair. Again, who would you rather be today? Brian Callahan or Kevin O'Connell? Because Kevin O'Connell's team is not playing football anymore this year either. They're not going to win the championship, just like Brian Callahan's team didn't win the championship. But guess which one of the two is not on the hot seat? The one that won 14 games this year. So if you get Sam Darnold and you win 10 games with him, you're not on the hot seat. That matters to the guys that are making these decisions because, again, these are their careers and their livelihoods. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, live from Bridgestone Arena. It's 1025 The Game.
So that's the other side of it there. Is this a Stillman thing, or is that like the commonly held view down in Tennessee? You know this guy, right?
I can't speak to that. I just know that, he's the kind of like this show of down there and gives that side of it. Because I mean, it's Nashville. It's a lot of like, rah, we done love our Titans.
I'm sorry, I had to play that cut today. That was Felder and Mass in Boston. Again, they were playing cuts. So on Saturday or Sunday, Vrabel got hired, and Matt McCarthy, that does like the, he's on the air there, and he does fill-ins and weekends. And he was like, "Hey, can you come on my show and talk Vrabel?" I said, "Sure." So they, were asking me a lot of questions about, is Vrabel good at hiring offensive coaches? And I'm like, no. Of course he's not. We all remember Todd Downing and Tim Kelly and, so on and so forth. And so they played the cuts yesterday on Boston, and I died after what all's gone down the last couple days. Ian, can we get that cut one more time again? Just they're playing these cuts about me talking about Vrabel. And again, I like Vrabel. I mean, I'm not sure Vrabel likes me, but I like Vrabel. And yet they were like, wait a minute. So is this how people in Nashville feel about Vrabel?
So that's the other side of it there. Is this a Stillman thing, or is that like the commonly held view down in Tennessee? You know this guy, right?
I can't speak to that. I just know that, he's the kind of like this show of down there and gives that side of it. Because I mean, it's Nashville. It's a lot of like, rah, we done love our Titans.
We done love our Titans. With that, it's time for Predators Game Day.
It's hockey night in Smashville.
Walk over to Yossi. Here's one-timer, he scores!
Bringing you the keys to victory and the latest storylines surrounding the Nashville Predators. This is Predators Game Day, now on Stillman and Company.
Predators Game Day is presented by TJ Anderson Homes and Benchmark Realty, online at tjandersonhomes.com. Get your house seen, heard, and sold with TJ Anderson of Benchmark Realty. The Predators come in at 13-21-7, good for 33 points. That's not very good at all. And the Vegas Golden Knights are the best team in the league, 29-11-3. Today's game will be right here, 7 o'clock, right here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game, which, of course, we're very excited about. And it should be noted that Steven Stamkos has recorded 15 points. That's 6 goals and 9 assists in 12 career games against the Golden Knights, and has found the score sheet in 11 of 12 career contests versus Vegas. Meanwhile, Philip Forsberg recorded his 8th career season hat trick on December 31st, 2022 at Vegas. Is it bad? Now, I'm just asking this for a friend. Is it bad when we had Barry Trotz on, and Barry Trotz said, hey, this season's been tough, but we feel like we can pick it up and get in there. But, hey, we're going to get a good pick this year. And I said, well, in order to get the better pick, you have to lose. And Barry said he wasn't going to actively hope that they lost. Is it bad that at this point in the season, I don't care if they win or lose anymore? And I'm like, you know what? The more they lose, the better shot they have at the number 1 pick. If they start winning games like this where they're not supposed to win against Vegas, am I going to get mad about this? Should I get mad about this? I feel like I'll care more about this in February. That'll be like, okay, now it's time to really embrace the tank. But I think we have to be realistic with it, too. Predators Game Day presented by TJ Anderson Homes and Benchmark Realty, online at tjandersonhomes.com. Again, that's my realtor. Get your house seen, heard, and sold with TJ. Max has the pregame show. That's next, Stillman and Company. By the way, Barry Trotz listens to Noah Khan, in case anybody cared. That's it for us, Stillman and Company. We'll see everybody tomorrow, too.